A lot of people expect me to be running around chasing groupies with axes and things, you know, which I only do on weekends.
Take another bite, it'll be alright. What's wrong will soon feel right. Dangerous tonight. Dangerous, I'm a dying breed. Poisonous like a centipede. I'm capable.
A young man from Phoenix, raised in the church by a father who happened to be a pastor, eventually ascends to icon of shock rock and something of a profane prophet, only to shock the shit out of even more people by coming clean as a Christian. Gosh, I can't imagine what that's like. But this ain't about me and Alice having the self-same supervillain origin story. While many a metalhead has experimented with macabre imagery since, and even a fair few pop rockers did before, Arthur Brown for instance, Alice Cooper went whole hog on that bitch. Skeletons strung the fuck up from pillar to post, full leather bondage apparel, stage makeup, disembodied corpses, beheadings, and hangings. When Salvador Dali dubbed his stage show musical surrealism, it was an exercise in understatement. But this is the Metal Mythos, motherfuckers, and the only legacy we're interested in is the musical one, which is why today's video comes with something of a caveat. Alice Cooper's career has more curves than Lombard Street. For every ageless cock rock classic, there's some dog shit and no mistake, albeit while maintaining enough minimal quality to ensure even the ass albums are actively listenable. In short, banging it to Alice Cooper is a rivet head roller coaster, so strap the fuck in, because while the valleys are indeed deep, the peaks are pretty damn high, and there's even a fair few loop-de-loops on this motherfucker. So slap on the grease paint and slaughter a fucking chicken. It's time for the forefather of heavy metal, the almighty Alice Cooper.
Groucho Marx loved the show because he saw the burlesque in it. He brought Mae West to one of the shows. Mae West and Groucho Marx watching an Alice Cooper, and neither one of them were phased at all. The audience was going, Groucho Marx. I'm looking for the side and see Groucho Marx and Mae West going, it's good vaudeville.
That assassinated the Summer of Love generation began its life right here in Phoenix, Arizona, at one of our very most ghetto high schools, Cortez, where the Earwigs were born, a one-off lark intended to spoof and live vicariously through the Yardbirds. This project eventually became the Spiders. The lineup consisted of Alice himself, under the more demure but somewhat more vampiric God-given nomenclature of Vincent Fernier, along with lead guitarist Glenn Buxton, bassist Dennis Dunaway, and at that time, two other friends on their track team. Nowadays, the only track they run at Cortez is between their forearm and fucking bicep, but back then, when America still had a fucking society, the Cortez track team was undefeated, and the man who would be a band, who would be a man, known as Alice Cooper, was their Star Trek athlete. Filling out the lineup later would be Camelback High School luminary and drummer Neil Smith, and North High rhythm guitarist Michael Bruce. But Phoenix then as now had a dog shit rock scene, and thus they hit the skids to sunny California after a few Arizona radio hits, where by all accounts they scared the living LSD out of those hemp-huffing hippies.
Alice came on before the Doors came on. They did a song called Nobody Likes Me.
We cleared that room in about 10 minutes. I mean, there was people running for the Doors.
I realized that the reaction was amazing. What it takes to get people to leave when they came to see the Doors. If you're capable of getting that kind of reaction at someone, if you just redirect it, I thought we had a real chance.
Enter Frank Zappa, the godfather of fucking weird and the grandfather of the Alice Cooper phenomenon. So he sat him down in the studio, time strictures forbidding his heavy involvement. He delegated the responsibility to his brother, returned later that day, and informed them all it was fucking finished. And so the Alice Cooper cannonade was fired off the back of what is effectively a fucking rehearsal recording.
And he went, I don't get it. Where are you guys from? And I said, Phoenix. And he goes, Phoenix? It's a cowboy town. Now I really don't get it.
But look, there's another important element to early Alice. A man who would loom large in the music industry as a whole for multiple decades thereafter, a fledgling aspiring manager by the name of Shep Gordon.
In the morning when I went to the pool was Janis Joplin. And she was sitting with Jimi Hendrix and the Chambers Brothers. And And for me, as a pharmaceutical salesman, this was my target audience. So Hendrix said to me, if the police, they knew I was doing something illegal, you need a front, you need a cover if the police ask you, where'd you get your money? So I said, great, what should I do? And they said, you Jewish? And I said, yeah. And they said, you should be a manager.
To this day, the silent member of Alice Cooper, Shep Gordon, continues to manage the band without a formal contract.
It's an amazing relationship in the fact that we still don't have a contract together. We never got around to that. We met...
Very poor management.
Yeah. I find that I'm now managing him. While I'm playing golf, he's doing interviews, which I love. I love that. It's such payback. It's such amazing payback.
You don't get much more rock and roll than that, folks. And it was Shep who would wind up scoring the gig to end all goddamn gigs, the ominously named Toronto Peace Festival in 1969, taking zero pay for his services in exchange for assuring the then unknown Alice Cooper band a slot between John Lennon and The Doors at the height of the relevance for each. But it wasn't the music people would remember, but arguably the most infamous item of rock lore ever recorded. And it all began with a chicken?
And at the end of the show, we always broke open a pillow, a white, feather pillow. One white feather pillow was about half filled. Somebody in the audience threw a chicken up. They had the chicken in the audience. They threw it on stage. And I took it. And, I figured I was from Detroit. I'd never been on a farm in my life, I figured it had wings, it had feathers. I'd just throw it back up and it would fly away.
The kicker to that is the fact that the first 6 rows were all in wheelchairs. They put all the people in wheelchairs, so they're the ones that tore the chickens apart and threw the parts back on stage.
When you look to one side of the stage and there's John Lennon, and you look to the other side and there's Jim Morrison, and they're watching the show going, what is going on? There was like feathers and chickens, and they both dug it.
Next day in the paper, Alice Cooper kills chicken and eats it, and blood, and Frank Zappa calls up and he says, Alice, did you kill a chicken on stage last night? And I went, no. And he says, well, don't tell anybody, they love it.
Big, bold, bloody murder headlines followed, and almost overnight, Alice Cooper were the most dangerous band on the planet, but they still had a record to sell. Alice idolizes the Yardbirds even in the modern day, which follows because the Birds, like the Coop, kick new and exciting kinds of ass. As such, his radio show features them in regular rotation to this day, so it ain't the most surprising occurrence that the inaugural Alice Cooper release, from the soaring vocal harmonies to the garage reverb, sounds a fair bit like the Brit rockers in question, but as often as it's been appraised as an under-the-radar debut record, there was in fact a smash hit top 40 single hiding in plain sight on the record. It simply didn't have the lyrics to match just yet.
Look up, standing with your head held high, you will be reflected. You look outstanding with your eyes in disguise. Just be top rank could meet on your choice. I wanna be elected. I can't do the dandy in a gold Rolls Royce. I wanna be elected.
Buxton and Bruce's guitar work is solid. The battery of Neil Smith and Dennis Dunaway steals the show, but Alice's voice is still a bit like the Byrds for my taste. Too sing-song, too saccharine for what would soon blossom into the shock rock legend that launched an entire genre.
Most of those bands were always, hey, it's just for the music, man. Our band was going, we want a Ferrari. We want, 2 blonde girlfriends, some switchblades, and a big house. Yeah. We were capitalists.
We made the hippies mad. We made the tough guys mad. We made the gays mad.
Vincent Furnier was Alice Cooper's 21-year-old lead singer.
We made everybody mad. What are you going to do about it?
Those familiar with the Mythos know not all first albums are created equal. Sure, there's the odd Iron Maiden or Wasp where the first cuts sink the deepest, but then there's Motorhead, Accept, Judas Priest. Not all these bands had bad first albums, but the best was definitely yet to come. And the Coop was the latter phenomenon to the fucking extreme. 2 albums deep and still twisted in the wind and serving up pseudo-psychedelic shit sandwiches that were already losing their fucking flavor. Here, the Yardbirds worship was exchanged for a feckless imitation of every subset of psychedelia from The Who to Jefferson Airplane, with none of either band's songwriting in fucking tow. And in fairness to the fucking Coop, they were fighting their own producer half the time, with the grand poobah of granola chomping, hiking, hippie protest music, David Briggs turning the knobs and hating the band from the bottom of his goddamn guts. And while the record visibly suffered, it's also not all that agonizing to listen to, as Alice at least had the sense not to bore us all to tears with lengthy, pretentious compositions, most clocking in under the 3-minute mark and more than a few hovering around the 2 spot. It's quick, it's vacuous, it professionally fades into background music, but it's also ultimately painless. And for all Alice's claims that it was Bob Ezrin who would hone his gravel gargling vocal delivery, it's actually on Easy Action where the man who would be Alice started actually sounding like him.
And I'm coming after you. I'm coming after you. Coming after you.
The second Alice Cooper offering would be the final from Frank Zappa's Straight Records, solely because it was sold to Warner Brothers that very year. But as it turns out, all this flux was for the fucking best, because the record to come was better by a lot.
I was the great other. I was the great white hope. The great destruction of wimpy rock. Here was Alice. We can depend on Alice to go out there, and we can depend on the parents hating him.
See my lonely life unfold. I see it every day. See my only.
Grandpa Zappa's gone Splitsville, record company's gone corporate, and what's proof you can actually earn your keep? Last album was widely panned as a festering fucking turd. What's a metal icon in the making to do? Simple. Say fuck it, call a heavy metal mulligan, ship back to Alice's birthplace and budding hard rock, not to mention voter fraud capital of the world, Detroit, and craft what is effectively an all-new first fucking album, eschewing Frank's fucking relatives, not to mention Neil Young's sloppy seconds, for a mousy Jewish hippie by the name of Bob Ezrin, who reacted in Alice's words as if he'd been given a surprise package and found a box full of maggots. Despite the clash of styles, the musical marriage would make Alice Cooper. Love It to Death is their troglodytic progeny, and malformed though it fucking is, the tunes came along for the ride this time, including the first true smash of Alice's iconic career.
I gotta get out of this place. I go running in outer space. I'm 18 and
Sonically, Love It to Death's defining divergence is roughening up the guitars, Alice getting that growl going, and otherwise steering into some fairly obvious Stones worship. And before you call BS, tell me Mick and Keith couldn't have cranked this tune out.
you don't know what I'm going through. I'm right in between, so I'll just play along with you.
Folks, it's fucking pseudo-Stones with a haunted house on stage.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
And the music was inherently theatrical. So take it to the next level. Let's use illusion. So you go to the best guy, and Amazing Randy was the best guy.
We called a magician named Amazing Randy, and we said, listen, we need to kill an entertainer on stage. What would be effective in a big arena? How would people see it?
I wore a big hood as the executioner, and I wore a big furry coat.
If you're going to get your head cut off, make sure that when that head comes off, the head looks like it lops off and blood squirts out of the guillotine.
We had a lot of good adventures, a lot of fun.
Well, there's such an enormous lack of entertainment in rock music, you know. I mean, it got to the point where if you go to a concert, all you're going to see is a guitar solo, a drum solo, you know, and how far can that go? You know, you want to see something that you're going to go home and talk about and scare your parents with, you know. So if some 14-year-old boy goes home wearing eye makeup saying, hey, Alice Cooper wears it, why can't I wear it? And of course his parents are going to say,
Love It to Death was the moment that made the Alice Cooper band in more ways than one, might I add. Supported by a spectacular if occasionally flawed fucking record, the Alice Cooper Band beat the pavement longer and harder than Amazing Atheist boils his own balls. So much so, in fact, that the record company did what record companies do and worked the world-smashing shit out of the band, shuttle fucking them into the studio at supersonic speed, such that, yes, inside of 1971, we would receive the fucking follow-up. But if anyone believed the quality of the recording would suffer for the reduced writing time, them bitches was about to be blown the fuck out.
We've sold out like every single big hall in the country now. Whereas as they used to leave by the hordes, they're now coming to see it. You know, it just might have to do with the fact that there is a certain air of violence in the air right now.
The telephone is ringing. You got me on the run. I'm driving in my car now, anticipating fun.
This is where the rubber meets the road, my friends. Literally, from the opening strains of early 70s standout Under My Wheels, Killer earns every ounce of its namesake. A hard rock tour de force lapsing at even measures into metal and the early outset of punk rock without stumbling a single step in the process. Any avowed adherent of rock and roll will likely already be aware of its influence on everyone from Slash to the Sex Pistols, but what speaks to the stellar record itself is that a single spin of the fucking thing stands well up to the hype, even after all this time. It's a weird album that way. You sort of saunter on into it, knowing it has a fair few bangers, then slowly, inextricably, as Under My Wheels gives way to Be My Lover, gives way to Halo of Flies, Jim Morrison tribute song Desperado, and on and on and on the fuck on, you gradually wake into the dawning realization that sweet saturnine nuts, this record alone accounts for a solid 30-minute motherfucking block of Alice Cooper's live show. Even today, rounding it all out with Dead Babies and the title track, you eventually arrive at the irrefutable fact that this ain't an album at all. It's a greatest goddamn hits record, and for my money, the ideal introduction to Alice. If you want to start off in the 70s heyday, Killer is exactly where you do it. Perhaps no other Alice album can credibly claim to still be a profound fucking influence on rock music of the modern persuasion. Hell, Halo of Flies by itself represents some of the most successful and seminal musical experimentation Alice Cooper ever embarked on. Over the course of one 8-minute, 21-second stunner, the Phoenix 5-piece span everything from prog rock to neoclassical to a cleft-palated progeny by the name of punk, until it all catapults back to earth in a fusillade of fretwork and discordant drum rolls.
Halo
Killer crushed the charts, very nearly finding itself on the top 20, but in Britain, this album would prove all the more influential. Virtually every punk and metal act of the late 70s and early 80s would invariably invoke the name Alice Cooper in hushed reverence, most, if not all, inculcated by Killer, and with damn good reason. Killer, like Metallica's Load, is one of the most appropriately named albums ever incarnated. Buy it, you indecisive hand-wringing retards. Next!
I said, we need a song that's going to capture the last 3 minutes right before you get out for summer vacation. You know, when you're sitting there in class, in biology class at 2:57, and those last 3 minutes, when that bell rings, you're going to be out for 3 months of just partying and having fun. I said, if we can capture that on tape, that's going to be an anthem. And we got it.
The production is up. Alice's voice has gone from guttural, primal, and inexperienced to an artfully crafted rock and roll snarl, and the band are tighter than an IRS agent's asshole. But the music press, if you can believe it, were already pronouncing the funeral rites for rock. Oh well, Alice Cooper said to themselves, guess we'll crank out one of the all-time classics of 70s hard rock. While arguably not as musically accomplished as what came before and after, and largely celebrated for the eponymous single, one fact of early Alice remains ineffable. The deeper you dig into the deep cuts, the more likely you emerge with assloads of 24-karat kick-ass. While the proceedings are poppier in many immediately recognizable ways, featuring repeated use of horns, piano, and the odd silly-ass sound effect, this shit is still more raw than the skin on Brie Larson's knees. Alice's influence on the yet-to-emerge monstrosity known as punk rock is steeped in every goddamn groove of this record.
State penitentiary, she wanted an Einstein, but she got a Frankenstein. Yeah, I'm proud to be public animal number 9.
You'd get like acts like Alice Cooper, which I thought was terrific fun, hanging himself and biting chickens and just being completely disgusting.
On the tour for Schools Out, Alice Cooper assaulted the world, beginning in Britain. And at least initially, sales were a little slow. That is until Shep Gordon got an idea made in marketing heaven.
Alice had just done this great shot with Richard Avedon, naked, with a
Boa
constrictor around his genitals. Let's blow it up 40 feet long. Let's break it down in Piccadilly. We have girls in hot pants giving out flyers for the Alice Cooper show in Piccadilly as the police are freaking out. I mean, they're just freaked out. The second time we broke it down, we backed up traffic about 40 miles, and they arrested the truck driver. We wake up the next morning.
He's sick. He's absolutely sick. He brings the paper into me, and we both look at each other going, yes!
And the show sold out in that day. It was, they were scalping tickets for like £100 afterwards.
The result? A #1 hit in the UK. The influence of Alice overseas was such that when the first wave of punk began to emerge in the mid-70s, almost as often as the Ramones they all ripped off, Alice Cooper would be cited by everyone from The Clash to the Sex Pistols as a primary influence for the genre. And then Alice set his blackened eyes on America with an eye-catching cover, the desk for which is still on display at the Hard Rock in Vegas, and a vinyl wrapped lovingly in a pair of paper panties. Schools Out was a seismic smash, skyrocketing to spot #2 on the US Billboard charts. Not the Billboard rock charts, the Billboard metal charts, or impressionist Tibetan throat singing charts, as Simps will celebrate today. #2 on the Billboard charts, full fucking stop. What had begun as a rock and roll freak show, we're now shitting on the likes of Neil Young, Wayne Newton, and Cher 15 fucking faces ago. For perspective, Kiss, widely considered to be more commercially successful than Alice, at least in all-time sales, has never had a record that charted higher than 7. Yes, I'm aware Sonic Boom charted at #2, but that was in the modern era where selling 7 copies at a fucking lemonade stand made you #1 in the country. Alice charted at #2 with multiples of millions sold. See also Drake pretending he's tied Michael Jackson's record for #1 singles with roughly 1/1000th of fucking sales. Schools Out was a cataclysmic success, but the impact didn't stop with commercial accolades. Though Alice, ever popular internationally, serves as inspiration for everything from the nascent punk genre to come to Japanese RPGs more than 2 decades hence. To some, Schools Out is less an album than a single with 8 B-sides. But when you tear into the other material, what you find is that the primary reason for this appraisal is because most of the other material was frankly too fucking heavy for 70s hard rock radio. And so, even to this day, the only song for this album to be regularly featured in the Coop's circus of a stage show is the admittedly catchy but impossibly overplayed title track. If you only want that song, fuck it, buy a greatest hits album. But if you want an album of undeservedly obscure undertracks that amplifies in excellence with every successive spin, don't be a bitch, buy the album. But if School's Out overshadowed every other song around it, fortunately for Alice, what came next did not suffer from the self-same syndrome.
We were the band that drove the stake through the heart of the love generation, you know, and it was true. People were bored with peace and love, and we were certainly the next thing.
Hello! Hooray! Let the show begin. I've been ready.
We decided we would just make fun of ourselves. Because what were we? We were billion-dollar babies. We were a bunch of kids that had all the money in the world, and we were just brats. And that's what Billion-Dollar Babies was about, just being a brat. Excess, American excess, violence, sex, death, money. And we were just kind of like glorifying everything that was American.
If Alice had gaily loped from strength to strength, Billion-Dollar Babies was where he started slamming those steroids. What we're covering now is Alice Cooper's very first #1 album. Most impressively of all to this point, it was also his longest, yet its approach proved the opposite of Alice's previous effort, with School's Out arguably indulgent in its embrace of sound effects, atmosphere, and theatrical experimentation as it embraced a central theme. Billion-Dollar Babies, for the most part, is just a collection of kick-ass, pithy rock tunes. Really, most of the theatricality found on Billion-Dollar Babies is packed into a single song, the epic I Love the Dead, to this day a mainstay in Alice's stage show.
I never even knew your now rotting face. While friends and lovers mourn your silly grave, I have other uses for you, darling.
But Billion-Dollar Babies is more stacked than Kat Dennings. While School's Out was essentially a single song with a bunch of backup dancers, from the pompous, powerful opener Hello Hooray, which still opens Alice's sets even to this day, to the title track Sick Things, or the pounding political satire of Elected, damn near every second of Billion-Dollar Babies is still in regular rotation on classic rock radio. Perhaps none more than the song which arguably transcended his hard rock roots to become a mainstream pop hit, No More Mr. Nice Guy.
And I'm getting real shot down and I'm feeling mean. No more Mr. Nice Guy. No more Mr. Clean. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
So much for Alice Cooper ain't got no songs, huh, Kiss Army? Well, with a song called I Love the Dead and Elected on it, it's essentially a billion-dollar Biden concept record. While School's Out may be a bigger song than anything on this album, if an acquaintance inquires, hey, I want to join the Coop Troop, where do I re-up? The uncontested answer, if you ain't got access to Killer, is Billion-Dollar Babies. It's Alice at their most accomplished. No filler, all killer, and the finest effort since the album in question. Next!
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege and pleasure to introduce the world's greatest singer, Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper were on top of the world and top of the pops. Everyone from Mae West to Groucho Marx to Salvador fucking Dali was discussing them.
On the side of the stage, you look over and it's Jack Benny and George Burns. And over there it's Mae West and Fred Astaire, and they're watching the show.
We go to the St. Moritz Hotel. Salvador Dali walks in and he goes, "The Dali is here."
And then he went into this speech about the Dali, the greatest artist, the Cooper, the greatest artist.
And the audience is shocked, beyond shock. You know, it's springtime for Hitler for them. They're like, and the vaudevillians are going, huh. George Burns is going, yeah, I worked with a guillotine, 1929.
I'll never forget that line.
You know, so, he didn't use a snake, but...
And he has this brain with him. And he goes, "This is the Alice brain. It's got ants crawling all over it, and the ants spelled out Alice and Dali, and a chocolatey Claire running down the back."
Making mainstream television appearances, selling out stadiums, and in 1973 they were even asked to contribute to the sophomore Roger Moore Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun. Now, they'd lose out on the theme music honors to Lulu in arguably the Bond franchise's worst creative decision until they cast Madonna in Die Another Day, but they threw up their hands and slapped it on this solid slab of hard rock, Muscle of Love. Bond villain actor Christopher Lee argued with the producers about not including it in the film, but Bond's loss was Alice Cooper fans' gain, and if you wonder why they didn't sweat it so much, to put it bluntly, the band were booming. Billion Dollar Babies blew the fuck up, and the entire world was their deep-fried oyster. And if it sounds like the other shoe is fixing to drop, you're only half right. It's less a shoe than a goddamn Godzilla foot. But Alice would hang on by their fucking fingernails, cranking out one last classic record before it all imploded. Muscle of Love was regarded as a misstep for most of the following decade, and indeed, it does bear the dubious distinction of being the album that killed Alice Cooper. But one listen to the record and it's clear that reputation has more hyperbole than a Jewish mother's life story. In fact, countervailing against its repute as being softer than Nick Fuentes at a titty bar, Muscle of Love kicks off arguably even more metallic than the preceding album. Big Apple Dreamin', while equally anthemic, is heavier than Hello Hooray, and Never Been Sold Before, despite a baffling decision to include a fucking horn section, is a pounding paean to prostitution when compared to its counterpart on the upbeat Billion Dollar Babies. If there's any element that's conspicuous by its absence, it's the expert production of Bob Ezrin, who, sensing tension beginning to mount within the band, elected to forego a follow-up to Billion Dollar Babies.
There was a point at which the band was starting to flex their muscles, meaning the instrumental band within the Alice Cooper group. They wanted more recognition. They wanted more respect. They felt like I was too sort of in charge of that side of things.
The band wanted to do solo albums.
Other bands have done it, but we were sort of warned by management that it's not a good idea to take a year off and do a solo album.
It was clear to me on the first day of rehearsal that some people in the room were not happy to see me. And that happens, you know, in life, sometimes that happens. By the end of the day, I just realized that this was not going to be a happy experience. I had a little meeting with Allison. I just said, it's obvious they don't really want to work with me anymore. And if you ever decide to go out on your own, let me know, because I love you and I love working with you.
My attitude was, if you do solo records, then Alice does his, and you're fucked. Because this is the only one people care about, so please don't do it. But if you do it, then we got to do what we do.
Now, the band broke up slightly thereafter. Did you foresee that happening?
Yeah, I sort of did.
With that said, co-producers Jack Richardson and Jack Douglas give the album a respectable crunch that's arguably heavier than the preceding album and perfectly dovetails into its lurid lyrical content. If I could summarize Muscle of Love in a single word, it would be sleaze, an album conceptually devoted to cock rock coomers. You don't have to like it, but it was inarguably influential. You can crow about how it killed the band all you like. In fact, it arguably did, but this shit still charted at number 10 and spawned an army of imitators. How many glammy goddamn smut merchants would emerge over the decade to follow exactly? You think it's a coincidence this drops the same year as the New York fucking Dolls? No Muscle of Love, no Motley Crue, no Wasp. Hair metal itself ceases to exist. Muscle of Love is massively underrated and absolutely warrants repeated listens. Unlike, as it turned out, the band's frontman.
The band actually came to me and said, I don't think that we should do the theatrics anymore. All right, that's the biggest shock I ever heard in my life. I just went, you have got to be kidding me. I said, that's like taking a razor blade and slitting your wrist. I said, everybody wants to be like us, and now you want to be like California hippies? I said, what are you thinking? I could not talk them out of it. And so they all wanted to do their own albums, and I said, okay. I said, but you know, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to take all the money I have and go just the opposite. I'm going to go more theatrical than Billion Dollar Babies.
After 2 top 10 albums, Alice Cooper collapsed, albeit only the band. Glenn Buxton, Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, and Neil Smith had enjoyed Alice's early success as something of a sideshow attraction, but you have to put it all in perspective. This was smack dab in the douchiest portion of the prog-humpin' mid-70s. The long acid trip of the 60s was over, and it was time for every goof with a guitar to become some serious musician. It's the same prog-wank puff adder that struck Genesis around the same time, resulting in Peter Gabriel's Quit Firing. But over in America, Buxton and the boys were bit just as hard, slamming the brakes on a successful stage attraction that was, even then, printing money in arenas all around the country and demanding more musically inclined cringe fests and fewer fucking guillotines. Undeterred, lead vocalist Vincent Fournier, by now interchangeably referred to as Alice Cooper, took firm grasp of a cold domestic beer, shrugged indifferently, and replied, "'Kay, but bitch, I ain't stopping." And so Alice Cooper the band became Alice Cooper the man.
Shep was smart enough to understand that if there is going to be a solo career, I should own the name. I walk down the street, nobody says, "Hey, Vince." Everybody goes, "Hey, Alice." I was the character of Alice Cooper. I had to announce that to my mom and dad. You know, by the way, I'm Alice Cooper now. My dad's going, reading the paper, going, "Oh, that's nice."
Alice Cooper.
I just left my drink over there, and I don't have anything in my liver.
Tell me, are you working on an album?
Yes, the name of the album is Welcome to My Nightmare.
That sounds interesting.
I'm the murderer, and I will be murdered.
Perhaps never before in music, let alone rock, has an artist boarded the bullet train from top 40 hit to #1 smash single to breakup to fucking comeback all in under a year. What can I say? Shit moved fast in the 70s. Ask all 5 pieces of Duane Allman. It's not exactly easy to rocket up the charts in any capacity, let alone when you're beheading baby dolls and hanging yourself on stage every night while clad in a cock piece and a skin-tight leather fuck harness. But more impressive still is when post-breakup, in the immediate aftermath of a disappointing follow-up album, you cut the dead weight, repossess yourself, and craft a concept album of such quality, it hits the top fucking 5. I give you Welcome to My Nightmare, one of the all-time titans in hard rock history and an influence on the genre even to this day. Drafting Bob Ezrin back into the producer's chair after a 1-album hiatus, Welcome to My Nightmare, while still stacked with hard rock anthems, possesses that final coat of fucking polish that Muscle of Love sadly lacked. And with Bob Ezrin in his ascent, he was able to pull strings not only to assemble an exceptional lineup prominently featuring ex-Lou Reed bandmates Dick Wagner, Preckish John, and Penty Glenn, but building on the batshit Liza Minnelli cameo in Muscle of Love, this album would be the first to feature the vocal talents of celebrities such as the almighty Vincent Price.
All right, little boy. If it's excitement you're after, I'll show you the tormenting way to incredible pleasure. But always remember, there is no escape.
You are quite welcome, Michael Jackson. And while the title track and an even more elaborate stage show were inarguably the main attraction for the reborn Alice Cooper, the backbone that future-proofed the fucking record was The Rockers, Black Widow, Department of Youth, Devil's Food, Escape, and the ode to alcohol, Cold Ethel.
One thing I miss is cold Ethel and a skeleton kiss. We met last night, making love by the refrigerator light.
And that weren't no joke tune, folks. That was a fucking love song, for by this point, Alice Cooper was a full-blown 5-alarm alcoholic, rarely photographed or interviewed without his ubiquitous beer can. Fortunately for the frontman, however, it wasn't the only love of his life to turn up about the same time, as the increasingly elaborate show suddenly called for trained dancers, and in walked the woman who would change Alice Cooper's life forever.
There was this one girl that was the most beautiful dancer you've ever seen. She just floated up there.
I remember getting lost in conversation with Alice about childhood. We found out that,
were both pastors' kids.
Every night there was very romantic moments with her. And I started looking forward more to those moments than anything else.
Both of our fathers, who are pastors, ended up performing the ceremony, each giving us the vows to say to each other. Very special. Very special.
Two pastors' kids turned rock idols collided and the Coopers were born, and I'm happy to report are still going strong over 40 fucking years down the road. But the most emotional, arresting number of the entire collection is, without question, the haunting rock ballad, Stephen, wherein Alice relays the travails of a mad mental patient. Is Welcome to My Nightmare good? Put it this way. Half this album is in Alice's set to this day. It's at least as classic as School's Out or any of the others, if a touch on the soft side in places. Shep Gordon, however, came in clutch, securing 2 hours of primetime TV to advertise the show in its entirety, and so the Alice Cooper Welcome to My Nightmare TV special was born, a brilliant bit of marketing that was half long-form rock video, half horror movie, and would doubtless serve as a major influence for similar efforts by the likes of Kiss and later Thriller-era Michael Jackson. And the tour was a smash, shattering attendance records all around the country and enlisting an all-new generation of Alice fans to the fold. Yet, as the show rolled on down the road, the wheels started to come off, resulting in drastic weight loss from the already skeletal singer. By the time the show hit the Big Apple, the New York Times would famously opine Alice Cooper is tougher than he looks on stage, a clear reference to the physical toll his dawn-to-dusk alcohol habit was taking on the shock rock king. But with a staggering success under his belt, there was just one thing left to do. Follow that shit up. Feel free to file that under famous last words.
Number 1, what is your name?
My name is Alice Cooper.
Number 2, what is your name?
My name is Alice Cooper.
Number 3, what is your name?
My name is Alice Cooper. How do you stand on violence, number 3?
Like this.
Absolutely.
And we did Nightmare and Alice Goes to Hell at Nimbus 9. He had a friend from Hawaii that had a big Victorian house. They had an extra room. Instead of me staying at a hotel, I stayed in the upper room.
He stayed in the attic.
Oh. And they had a little 6-year-old kid, and the lady went to work, and she says, he gets home from school an hour before I do. Could you just watch him? Bring him over to the studio. And I went, sure. His name was Key. Little Key.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd bring him over, and we'd take him, have ice cream, and he'd go and play with the dog and everything like this. Keanu Reeves.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We didn't know it was him until years later, and he's doing an interview, and he says, my babysitter was Alice Cooper. And I went, what's he talking about?
Shit on me all you like. Hell, my German half will probably enjoy it. But ever since I picked it up on a lark one day in the CD section at Fry's Electronics, I've loved Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. It's more undercooked than Chipotle burrito meat and more uneven than Frank Miller's shoulders, but when it hits hard. Alice already explored his nightmare, and with his ascent from shock rock king to pop culture colossus, what began as impotent outrage from parental and religious groups became all-out acrimony and organized protests by the midpoint of that decade. And so, apparently already sentenced to the ironic punishment division of hell, Alice Cooper decided to broadcast his punishment live and in 4K, a loose concept album of Alice's descent into the lowest chambers of Inferno, resulting in one of the last truly classic Cooper songs of the 70s.
For making us doubt our parents' authority, for choosing to be a living obscenity, you can go to hell.
Even Even today, Go to Hell is one of the final songs of the classic Alice Cooper period that still often appeared in his shows thereafter. Something of a silent indictment of the mediocrity to follow as Alice spiraled in his substance abuse and his album concepts spiraled right along with him. But if Alice Cooper Goes to Hell was somewhat metaphysical in theme, that isn't to say the album isn't personal. With his habits out of harness, it was introspection time, leading to some spectacular hidden cuts, such as the alcoholic confession I Never Cry and the autobiographical Guilty. And hey, you ever hit Kiss's Dynasty album, watch Paul Stanley strutting around with off-brand Bee Gees music blaring behind him and wonder, now where the world red and fuck did Kiss get the idea to go Kisco? Well, from the same fucking place they stole every other idea, Alice Cooper. And just like I Was Made for Loving You, it's a song I hate so much, I have to listen to it 20 more fucking times just to make sure. Fuck you, disco is catchy. And a fine WCW Cruiserweight champion, might I add. Look, dog shit, disco and all, I love Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, and pound for pound, it may be the most underrated record of Alice's solo career. Certainly one from the 70s. But after Welcome to My Nightmare's top 10 success, this album only going gold was something of a disappointment, and so the decline commenced. What no one could have known is that the decline was much more than musical. For Alice Cooper, the character, was becoming a cancerous presence for Alice Cooper, the man.
Cheryl married Alice for better or worse. She knew he had a drinking problem, but she didn't know how bad his problem would become.
There didn't seem to be an obvious problem. If he were falling down or abusive or any of those things, I think attention would have been paid much more quickly.
Before I'd open my eyes, I'd have 3 or 4 hits of beer, and then I'd wake up, turn on the cartoons, and then get up, throw up. I said, okay, I'm ready for the day. Let's go.
It was just a slow disintegration, and somebody had to intervene.
Put a drink in my hand, I'm as scared as I ever could be. Give me some whiskey, mama, some remedy, double indemnity, bless me with ecstasy, bliss and whiskey.
You can preserve an awful lot of things in alcohol. A career is not one of them. Take the curious case of Alice Cooper's Lace and Whiskey. As a lifelong aficionado of film noir, I love the look, the style is spectacular, and the concept was outright visionary, but the music, to put it bluntly, was bloated bullshit. Too much fluff, not nearly enough rock, and entirely too much Bob Ezrin. There's still rockers here. The title track and several others still have a solid bite, but promoting the album with the narcoleptic crooner You and Me, albeit with a brilliant film noir-inspired music video, was a stroke of outright retardation. Though it was good enough for Frank Sinatra to cover, so what the fuck do I know?
You and me and our movie star. What we are is what we are. We share a bed, loving.
It was the late 70s, though. Disco was in ascent, and it's quaint now, but the music press at large were already reciting the funeral rites for heavy metal. In short, there was no social or commercial motive to make Lace and Whiskey any heavier than the preceding efforts, so Alice and Ezrin didn't fucking bother. But it's not entirely irredeemable, as future generations would soon discover. Yes, folks, even uninspired albums inspire someone. But by the time the tour kicked off with a full television special, Alice Cooper and Friends, in '77, Alice's alcohol issues could no longer be denied. Drunkenly bumblefucking about the stage between tired renditions of his classic material in a great big Elvis jumpsuit replete with goddamn girdle, Alice Cooper was almost a parody of his former glory.
Look at me. Would you buy a car from this man?
Now, on the heels of Lace and Whiskey, Alice would at last unleash something he'd been asked for by his fans since his debut, a proper fucking live album. Unfortunately, it was a bit too late to matter much, and the Alice Cooper Show was no Kiss Alive or Judas Priest Unleashed in the East, which was a real shame, as even at that stagger-drunk stage, Alice was at least as excellent a live band as both of the above. Rubbing salt in the tequila shot, the original Alice Cooper band reformed the same year, calling themselves the Billion Dollar Babies, with extremely pointed song titles evidently aimed at their former frontman. But Alice had far fatter fish to fry, even aside from the fact that he was drinking like one. Lace and Whiskey failed to chart anywhere near previous offerings, and with a stage show even more spectacular and expensive than what had preceded it, it was decided to start slicing off arena dates and rename it the School's Out for Summer Tour halfway fucking through. But when the class bell rang with his health and career failing in full view of the public, Alice would ultimately dismiss himself, checking into a full-blown sanatorium for both his alcoholism and other assorted mental issues. What isn't stressed enough in biographies of the band is that in the days before rockstar rehab, Alice Cooper was never really expected to leave again. In short, he had for the first time hit rock bottom, and so two paths presented themselves. He could molder behind bars for months on end as others far more famous than he had done in similar situations, or he could repossess himself, buck the bottle, and rise like a phoenix from Arizona. And rise he goddamn did.
Nobody says I want to be an alcoholic or drug addict. You don't see it coming. Yeah, I don't think I would have even had my first beer if I would have known I was going to go through what I went through. It was great for 15 years. And then 1 year, it was hell. Because it owned me. I didn't own it.
I got up one morning and threw up blood all over the floor. And that was God saying, party's over. You know, and my wife went, let's go.
I said, you're like a man with no skin. You know, and everything that touches you now hurts. And I said, what you really need right now is safety, like asylum.
I remember them closing the door and realizing that I wasn't going to come out again. That was it.
I feel if you beat something, you're allowed to make fun of it. You know, if you're in school and you beat up a guy, you're allowed to make fun of him then, because, you know, he knows he can beat. So I beat alcohol, and I don't see any reason, you know, why not to take a shot at it.
One of the criminally uncelebrated concept records of all time, From the Inside, emerged in '78, just in time for Alice to reclaim his throne as a pop culture icon. In the late '70s, pop culture didn't get much more pop than the fucking Muppet Show.
You, sir, are a demented, sick, degenerate, barbaric, naughty freako.
Why, thank you.
15 seconds to curtain, Mr. Cooper.
Ready whenever you say, Scooter.
Wow, I was good looking.
As Alice would later proclaim, From the Inside was an outright confession. Logic being, if I've subjected my audience to my struggles with alcoholism, then I owe it to them to also expose them to the cure. Of course, it also helped the morbid tale of a schizophrenic rock star being locked up in an insane asylum made for ideal fucking fodder for an Alice Cooper album.
I can't get my wrist to bleed. Just don't know why. Suicide appeals to me. The quiet room is sterilized and white.
So apropos, as it turned out. It was easily adapted by Marvel Comics for issue number 50 of Marvel Premiere, the first of many comic appearances for the Coop. Look, it ain't all that heavy, and with arrangements and lyrics co-written by longtime Elton John collaborator Bernie Taupin, the earliest hints of Alice's embrace of early new wave were already rearing their ugly face in places. But if you take this as a standalone work, One Flew Over the Cooper's Nest, if you will, it's inarguably one of the finest things Alice Cooper ever recorded, and without question, one of his most personal. As Alice got clean from the demon drink, he came face to face paint with the fact that he had essentially met and married his wife while he was a full-blown habitual alcoholic, and thus had never properly known her. The result, one of the most haunting love songs Alice ever authored, How You Gonna See Me Now?
I wrote that song, How You Gonna See Me Now? And I wrote that for my wife. She had never once saw me when I was totally sober. This was going to be the first time coming out of the hospital that I was going to meet my wife totally sober. And I thought, what if she doesn't like me?
'Cause I feel I let you down in so many ways.
Yes, Alice had emerged victorious over one demon. What no one knew at the time, indeed Alice didn't formally reveal it until 2014, was that he'd already begun indulging in an entirely different demon.
It was a new period of time. There's new kind of bands coming out. I was totally sober and not fully armed to fight them. But there was something called cocaine. All these punk kids thought they were faster than me. I am going to destroy you all.
You think you're cured?
Oh yeah, I can't even think about drinking, you know.
Do you think that you could turn back to alcohol as a crutch?
No, I don't think so. I've got like a second lease on life on the thing. And to me, it's really exciting.
Alice's influence on hard rock, heavy metal, and even punk is pronounced with some regularity. What's rarely acknowledged is that Alice was doing arty goddamn glam rock back when Bowie was still strumming 60s folk tunes. Yet in the interim, Ziggy Stardust had rivaled and, over the course of the 70s, supplanted the original, such that even today, a lot of people still mistakenly believe Bowie came first. And in the late 70s, with the Thin White Duke snorting thin white lines and riding the onset of new wave, Alice decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. Now, if you compare this to mid-70s prime cut Cooper, 1980s Flush the Fashion is outright unrecognizable. This is full-blown fucking new wave. But here's the thing. Between Alice's obvious influence on the genre and the recruitment of Queen and later Dokken producer Roy Thomas Baker, it's really goddamn good new wave.
We're all clones, all are one and one are all are one and one are all. We destroy the government, we're destroying time, no more problems on the way.
And in case his pop aspirations weren't apparent enough for you, out was Dick Wagner on guitar, replaced by Elton John Axeman Davy Johnstone. This was an all-new Alice, and he committed to the transformation completely. As he would later explain on his Nights with Alice Cooper radio show, the coke-addicted Alice remembers next to nothing that occurred during the production of the next 4 albums. But of the 4, Flush the Fashion is the one he remembers the most. He would later recount that each song title was taken from headlines randomly plucked from the pages of the National Enquirer. Helping the effort would be Alice's final appearances in his signature suit and makeup for the Meatloaf film Roadie.
And I'm braved in the face at the tramp at the ball. I'm all the reds by the bed of the suicide stall.
Both Pain and Clones would be minor hits, pushing the album up the charts to a respectable number 44. Nothing to sneeze at in 1980, or should that be snort? If Flush the Fashion was an experiment, it was a successful one. And if you intend to sample the new wave era of Alice, Flush the Fashion is easily the most accessible of the bunch. But even if he intended a proper follow-up, any hope of that would be dashed by his hands being surgically grafted to a fucking crack pipe, for we are about to bound headlong into the blackout period of Alice Cooper.
Bonsoir, ici Vincent de Montfournier. Ce soir, nous avons avec nous Alice Cooper. Alice, pourquoi êtes-vous à Paris? Et Dieu? Et la vie? Et la musique?
To call this the Alice Cooper blackout period is frankly underselling it somewhat. Alice was goddamn geeked. Don't believe me? Don't say you weren't warned.
Yeah, but tell me you didn't kill the chicken.
Well, Colonel Sanders kills chickens. I mean, you know. No, I don't really remember. Alice might have done that, but you know, I don't think I did. The thing about that is...
What is Alice somebody else?
Oh, yeah, well, Alice, you know, is the character that performs, really, you know. And
then who are you?
Oh, I'm just, you know, Ozzie Nelson, you know.
By this point, Alice was an outright addict with a side of rock musician. Hell, he wasn't even all that rock, with his initial dabbling in new wave and synth pop flowering into a frankly bizarre art rock hybrid that is musically fascinating but as incoherent as the man who wrote them.
I'm machinery with a semi-automatic heart. I'm unclassified. I terminate, I tear apart. I'm always there when you think I'm not.
You know you're half-assing it when you include a fake-as-fuck live version of an old Alice Cooper song onto what is ostensibly an all-new album. But that's exactly what Alice did on Special Forces with the $1 Billion Babies deep cut Generation Landslide, as was the style at the time.
Generation landslide, close the gap between them, and I laugh to myself at the men and the ladies who never conceived of a $1 billion baby.
How exhausted is this album? Put it this way. It includes 2 cover tunes, and one of them is a cover of himself. Is the cloud of coke smoke coming into focus for you? And hey, it was nice of Alice to ask me to cameo for him before I was born.
Alexander the Great at his best. You're a movie. Yes, I am.
You're a movie.
Right.
The Inception.
Yes.
You're a one-of-kind. You're a movie.
But for all its excesses and failings, Special Forces is an important album as well, for it's the precise moment that Alice Cooper realized that even if his albums now refuse to fucking chart, this one barely hit, what, 125 for the record? He could still pack people into his live shows. And so, stacking his tour with dates in European countries utterly starved of shock rock, the Special Forces tour actually became among the most successful stage shows he'd put on to date. Unfortunately for Fournier and company, thanks to his fucking freebasing addiction, it would also be his last for over 4 years. Utterly consumed by his crackhead inclinations, Alice Cooper would be unable to sustain a steady touring schedule and became an album-only act for the next 2 albums. His increasingly bizarre fucking albums.
Excuse me.
Yeah, hi.
Are you Alice Cooper?
Yes, hi, how are you? Hi.
Kidding.
Yeah.
You're kidding. Have you got a new album coming out, Alice?
Yeah, I do. Brand new album. Are you with the press?
Well, no, I work for a radio station.
Oh.
I'm with the press.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh.
Alice Cooper.
Yes, hi. Hi.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure, of course. Go ahead.
You got a new album coming out?
Yes.
Who produced it?
I produced it with Eric Scott, my first production in Warner Brothers. It's really happy with it. 16th album. Yeah. 16th album. Hi.
Wow. Well, you have a brand new album coming out.
Yes, brand new album.
When you coming to California?
I live in California.
Are you in the guillotine, Alice? No, I'm going to the guillotine right there.
Well, maybe in a second. I was going to call it Shy Kidneys, but I think I have another title for it.
How many records do you not remember anything about?
There's three in particular where honestly I don't remember writing them, recording them, or touring with them. And if you ask my real true fans, you know, I say, what are your favorite albums? It's those three albums. But they go, you'd expect they'd say School's Out or $1 Billion Babies. They go, no, DaDa, Special Forces, and Zipper Catches Skin. Those are the ones we love. And I'm going, jeez, I don't even know one song in any of those albums.
How bad off was Alice on this album? How to put this? Former guitarist Dick Wagner was re-enlisted for Zipper Catches Skin, only to de-enlist himself halfway through the recording because Alice Cooper was bringing his fucking crack pipe into the recording booth with him, and the band were sneaking hits off it in between takes. That about cleared up for you?
I remember freebasing with him, which I'd not done before. And I said, a little bit of coke's okay, dude, but when you start smoking that shit, it's like smoking your home.
82 was when everything was, I was totally addicted on every level, and I really couldn't see straight. Of course, when you're doing cocaine, the very nature of cocaine tells you you're doing everything great. It reinforces itself saying, oh yeah, that song you wrote just now is really, really good. And then, you know, you go back and listen to it now and go, oh my gosh, I should have thrown that one away.
But I remember leaving that pool house and just going, I can't stay here because I'm going to go down too.
I don't think even a lot of Alice Cooper fans realize how bad he was during this era, not least of which because by this point, most had forgotten he was even alive. This was a man dick deep in addiction, barely clinging on to his career, mid-crack binge. He was a motherfucking mess. But here's the thing. These albums, all four of the so-called blackout period, are some serious hidden gems in the pantheon of new wave music, right up there with the Missing Persons or anyone the fuck else. In fact, it features the vocal talents of Patty Donahue of new wave band The Waitresses on at least one tune.
Love them to death.
Hey, Valentino, you going somewhere? You wouldn't sneak out on me, would ya? What's that, a blonde hair?
Largely self-produced by Alice himself, Rhythm is Zipper Catches Skin's strongest quality. Recruiting a talented drummer the Metal Mythos faithful should be familiar with from our Alcatraz episode, the great Jan Uvina, and he deserves a hell of a lot of credit for kicking up the throttle on this material. You know how Iron Maiden's latest output is leaden with cyclopean arrangements that don't know when to start and never know how to fucking end? Yeah. Well, Zipper Catches Skin is the exact fucking opposite, with the longest tune on the album being almost exactly 5 minutes, and literally every other song being under 3. This album sounds like a crackhead fucking wrote it, and sadly, that's one of its strengths. If the material's weak, and thankfully not much of it actually is, then at least it doesn't waste your fucking time about it. If you like Bowie, Devo, or the like, but prefer it all a bit heavier, Zipper Catches Skin is a killer. Sadly, with only the synth-laden single I Am the Future to buoy it, this album did dick on the charts, and Alice didn't, or more likely couldn't fucking tour on it. But frankly, at this point, he had far larger concerns than single success. To put it plainly, he was about to become a fucking single.
I was raising our daughter, and I was watching my husband die before my eyes, and I was powerless to make any difference. I had begun divorce proceedings, saying, can't do this, won't continue to raise our child with this, and I'm moving to Chicago.
And now I was by myself. Just me and Alice.
Scarlet wants to hold me, wearing just a red felt hat. She was in the shadows, waiting for a turn and back.
It nearly killed me. I mean, it was like, I came really close. I mean, I was right down at the bottom. I was losing everything that I'd worked for. I lost You know, I was losing my career, I was losing my ambition, I was losing my family, I was losing everything to this bottle of whiskey. And I was throwing up blood every morning. I mean, throwing up blood on stage is great, you know, but when you're doing it in your Holiday Inn every morning, there's no cameras watching it or anything. You say, hey, I'm wasting all this.
He had this guy Landy, the guy that treated Brian Wilson, the psychiatrist, traveling with him and feeding him pills, and he was drinking. He had pills and he was drinking it.
He was working with Alice?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We went to Australia, and I had to call Shep and say, you gotta get this guy out of here, man. He's feeding Alice pills. Just trying to keep him sober to go on stage with.
As one partnership prepared to end, out of nowhere, another recommenced. Bob Ezrin, now one of the most successful producers in all of music, seeing his friend in evident distress, stepped in to help record the album that would become DaDa, an art rock album with an art rock cover and an art rock title, and the procession of studio musicians revolved anew, with Janu Vina leaving the drum chair to form Alcatraz and everyone else scattering into the fucking floorboards. Ezrin once again roped Dick Wagner and Prakash Jean of the Welcome to My Nightmare lineup into cutting this record, but Alice Cooper had collapsed. In the lowest depths of addiction, his wife and daughter Calico living miles away in Chicago, he relapsed once more into excessive alcohol consumption. You might think this would be the point where he pinches out Alice Cooper's answer to Chinese democracy, and you would be fucking wrong. What emerges might just be the best of the new wave Alice Cooper albums, with a surprisingly coherent concept given his physical and frankly fucking chemical state, and a lineup and production staff deeply familiar with one another. After one of the darkest synthesizer openings of Alice's career, DaDa becomes something of a dark masterpiece.
When my mother died, she laid in bed and cried, I'm gonna miss you, my brave little cowboy. I saw my father smile.
Really, DaDa only happens because Alice was at the tail end of his record contract and owed Warner one more album. Indeed, reference is made to the fact that he was fucking off from Warner in the obscure lyrics of the cleverly titled Formerly Warmer.
And I started coming up with titles, and I started thinking about this is his last Warner Brothers album, so let's have a character called Formerly Warmer.
Mm-hmm. So that's where that comes from.
That's the
When you said that to me earlier,
formerly
rang a bell
Warner
like that.
Brothers.
Right.
Formerly warmer peeks out the window when he feels really brave. Formerly warmer waves at his father out in the family grave.
When people do long-form listens of Alice's entire discography, 20 times out of 10, it's DaDa that jumps clean the fuck out of nowhere at him. Zipper Catches Skin is catchier. Flush the Fashion is more familiar. Special Forces is somewhere between the two, but DaDa is an altogether darker breed of cat, with complex lyrical themes surprisingly referencing his procession of personal catastrophes in a musical style that is both of and ever so slightly transcendent of its time. It's a haunting gem that's an absolute joy to find for those only familiar with classic 70s Cooper.
I was like locked in my house up there with a rock the size of a baseball and a gun.
I love this record. I recommend it. Indeed, in retrospect, there's more than a little of the metallic tinge that would later appear in earnest on Constrictor. But the crash was a-comin', and Alice Cooper crashed hard. He was barreling toward a nigh inevitable divorce, and his career would not survive another 4 feckless records. Indeed, DaDa arguably interrupted that recovery. By the time of this album, Alice had moved back to Phoenix, reconnected with his parents, and wanted precious fucking nothing out of the music industry anymore. He was off the drugs at least, but Bob Ezrin, who was also in the depths of addiction, reintroduced him to his old buddy Booze, with whom he remade a torrid acquaintance for the duration of the DaDa era. era. Beset by the bottle and drugs, Alice appeared destined to end up the same way as his Hollywood vampires drinking buddies Keith Moon and Jim Morrison. And then the preacher's son woke up one morning and decided to reclaim himself from the Alice Cooper character.
I took the rock that I still owed money on, put it in the toilet, and flushed it. And I went, what did I just do?
My husband and I, we just went and picked him up and helped him out as much as we could. His condition was very bad. He couldn't hardly function.
I believe that the only time that God can help you is when you have no fight left. All you can do is just go, help.
Alice was gone, Vince was back, and he was now sober, a committed Christian and father. Indeed, in that context, it's impossible to deny the central theme of DaDa. This ain't an album about an art movement. Indeed, the cover image isn't Bauhaus, but based on a Salvador Dali painting, a friend of Alice's who happened to be a surrealist. This is an album about family and death. The death of his marriage, the death of his career, and the express train to the grave which rapidly approached Alice Cooper if he didn't clean up his own act. And in the end, who helped clean him up? His earthly father and his heavenly father. His DaDa, if you will.
Maybe the most rebellious thing Alice Cooper ever did was become Christian. People think, well, you know, the hanging and the guillotine and the chickens and the stain and the blood and everything. I said, that's showbiz.
Yeah.
I said, what's rebellious? Certainly not tearing up a hotel room. Anybody can do that. I said, deciding to follow Christ? That's rebellious. Because who was the most biggest rebel of all time was Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He rebelled against the world.
Really, at this point, he wasn't all that sure he even wanted to come back to music. He was utterly fulfilled having his wife and daughter finally back at his side. Yet while Alice convalesced and discovered the all-new addiction of golf, a new genre, owing almost everything to Alice Cooper, had clawed its way back up the charts. Metal had gone mainstream, and soon it came calling for the Coop.
We came from this man's loins. He ejaculated and glam metal was born.
Be cruel to your school, 'cause you may never get another. Be cruel to your school.
It was the first time Alice had been seen in public since '82, and it was a spectacular success. But he hadn't appeared live just yet, and frankly, he wasn't sure he even could, having not done so sans chemical assistance since the early 70s.
I went to my pastor and I said, I think I got to quit being Alice Cooper now. And he goes, really? He says, you think God makes mistakes? And I went, no. He says, look where he put you.
Yeah.
He put you in, he said, he put you in the exact camp of the Philistines.
Yeah.
And you were basically the leader.
Yeah, that's true.
So now, what if you're Alice Cooper, but what if you're now following Christ?
Wow.
And you're a rock star, but you don't live the rock star life.
Yeah.
Your lifestyle is now your testimony.
Wow.
And that made total sense to me. I was terrified. I remember walking for about 2 hours in a circle. When that music starts, I don't know what's going to happen. What if Alice doesn't show up? I'd never played him straight. What if I go out there and I'm just Vince?
But nevertheless, Alice Cooper was coming to reclaim his crown from the glam metal mimeographs. And so, after an unplanned 3-year hiatus that quite nearly ended in the grave, Halloween 1986, Detroit, Michigan, broadcast live on MTV, a nightmare returned. And fuck did it ever rock!
As soon as the band started, I said, this is it.
And it all came on the back of a beastly record. Constrictor, enlisting the almighty Michael Wagner of Accept and Dokken fame to craft exactly the metallic incarnation Alice Cooper required. While Alice was an undoubted influence on metal, and some of his early material certainly fucking flirts with it, it's only with Constrictor that Alice Cooper could be credibly included in the same company as Priest and Maiden as a bona fide metal mainstay. Helping him in this effort would be an all-new, all-clean backup band. Though relative unknowns at the time, you may know some of these names as several have become legendary since. While David Rosenberg, not to mention a drum machine, would sit on the stool for the recording, it would be Ken K. Mary of Chastain fame who would prove the permanent drummer. On bass, a little fellow by the name of Kip Winger, and on guitar, the fretboard Frankenstein, the hard rock Rambo, circus freak huge with the shredcraft to match, Kane fucking Roberts.
Bob Ezrin, who was really important to Alice's career in the early 70s, and he got a tape of mine, and he gave it to Alice, and Alice, I think, came to see me play, and every other night of the week it was a strip club or something like that, but this was rock and roll night, and Alice snuck in. He put his hair up in his hat and sunglasses, and unfortunately the night that he came, I happened to get in a fight.
Don't know him? I guarantee you know his work, having contributed material to everything from Bud Light beer commercials to Rod Stewart, Kiss's Revenge album, and a good chunk of the soundtrack for the Mark Wahlberg movie Rockstar. Yeah, you know all those songs where Zakk Wylde is shredding away and you're simply saying, holy fuck, what a guitar god? Yeah, much of that is actually Kane Roberts. Alice's instructions were simple. I want heavy, I want catchy, and within reason, don't be afraid to fucking shred. And though Constrictor wasn't quite the pure metal release, shred he absolutely did. But thanks to a tie-in from Friday the 13th Part 6, it wouldn't be a metal tune to catapult Alice Cooper back to the top 40 prominence he so desired, but one of the catchiest cuts of synth horror rock ever written.
Yeah. The new single, it's from one of these films, isn't it, that's Friday the 13th Part 500
6.
or whatever.
Yeah,
it's Part 6.
Part 6. They're just going to keep making them until they finally kill him, but I don't think they'll ever kill him. He's like me, they keep killing him and he keeps coming back.
No, don't turn out the lights. Yeah, 'cause he's back. He's the man behind the mask. And he's out of control. He's back.
When you really think about it, that's something of a logical progression from DaDa. You can cringe all you like and claim Constrictor is uncommitted to its heavy metal framework, but from the stinkiest thrasher to the most bulbous sweatsuit bedecked death metal douche in existence, when He's Back hits the stereo, not one motherfucker hits the skip button. In truth, it was originally supposed to be a slightly heavier affair, one which was later reworked into the pop metal tune Trick Bag.
He's going out tonight, gonna make his rounds to get his fill. Standing straight and tall, he's a ton of fun, and he's dressed to kill.
But one of the most metal songs on the album ain't even on it, as the upbeat hard rock Summer sadly only appeared on the movie's soundtrack.
Rock all night, gonna blow this town. To morning light, going round and round. Hard rock, summer in the USA.
Constrictor is admittedly uneven, and its production is more shit-smeared than Amber Heard's bedsheets, but as comebacks go, it did the business big time, culminating in an appearance at WrestleMania 3 alongside the great Jake the Snake Roberts.
When did they come to you with the Alice Cooper business?
Fairly early on. They asked me how I felt about it. I fucking, I popped. You know, growing up in high school, School's Out for Summer was the #1 song my senior year.
Man.
So fuck yeah, Alice Cooper, oh my God. I was a big mark for Alice.
Alice Cooper, I'm sure you're going to be keeping tabs on Jimmy, Mouth of the South Heart. I noticed the spurs.
Yes, I'll be watching him all the way. This will be his nightmare. This is also my hometown and the hometown of heavy metal.
Oh, I love it.
We're going to ride, brother.
Talk about the Manson murders being terrifying. How about 90,000 people, wrestling fans, 60,000 of them blue-haired old ladies screaming for blood. And I'm going, they don't really believe this, do they? They don't really believe this is real, do they? You know, and I think they did.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Referee, get in there and stop this. Look at that, 15 to 18 foot of python. Oh, man. Look at this. The Mouth is fighting for his life in there.
But that was back in March. By Halloween season, a follow-up was in the offing. And if commitment to metal is what you've been jonesing for, fuck are you in for a treat.
So Constrictor was kind of like, we almost looked at Constrictor as our first album, you know, because the 18 albums before that, or 17 albums before that, were sort of like, that's in another era, as far as I'm concerned. So we're starting all over. Constrictor was number one. This is like the second album.
I write about sex and violence, and Alice writes about violence and sex, so we kind of have a common ground.
We find we kind of come together somewhere in the middle there, you know.
That's a lovely, lovely story.
There's two questions I get fucking perpetually every time Alice is mentioned. What's his most underrated record, and which one's your fucking favorite? The answer in both instances is 1987's Raise Your Fist and Yell. Hell, it's technically responsible for my nom de guerre, as near the end of the album's lead single, Freedom, Alice begins frantically chanting the album title until at last it becomes slurred into Razor Fist and Yell.
Freedom to rock! Freedom to talk! Freedom! Raise your fist! Raise your fist! Raise your fist! And yeah!
Darker, crunchier, more metallic, and infinitely more catchy than Constrictor, Raise Your Fist and Yell, at least from a musical standpoint, is the true heavy metal comeback Alice Cooper was gunning for since '86. Alice has always been blood-soaked Americana, and nothing was more pop culture in the late '80s than the slasher genre.
There's something about, I watch 2 splatter movies a night. I've become like a
What's
splatter video
movie?
vampire voyeur or something.
In my eyes, blood drops look like roses on white lace. They won't wash away. In my mind, they're roses on white lace. Straight from the heart, blood drops look like.
While it's often alleged that this period was simply a callous attempt to chase trends, the truth is Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell were effectively the first time Alice Cooper had a proper personal sonic identity since at least 74. And a lot of that credit has to go to Kane Roberts, who wrote the vast majority of the material to be found here, and after a few rough cuts on Constrictor, matured massively as a songwriter as well. And speaking of fucking massive, look, dude was big on the previous album, but by Raise Your Fist and Yell, the man was a moose. Many forget the name of this album, or even the name of a single song from it, but I have yet to encounter anyone who attended an Alice set between 86 and 88 who fails to recall the fucking meat mountain melting the strings on the guitar solos.
When people see you, they probably think, oh, that guy can't play guitar. He must be very clumsy. He's so big.
Yeah, I had a little, I remember I worked on Rod Stewart's last album. He's one of those guys that I listened to as a kid, and I was freaked out that I had an opportunity to play. And the first time he saw me, he was really scratching his head, you know. And then we hit it off real well. I ended up doing a lot of work on the record, so.
I think when people hear you play, they probably converted after that.
Yeah.
How the hell hell this man never wound up in Manowar after they lost their guitarist around the same time is an immortal mystery of the metal universe. Would have saved him a few Chester the Molester headlines several years hence, I'll tell you that fucking much. And the deepening maturity isn't only in the music. The lyrics alternate between standard splatter movie metal and for the first time an exploration of Alice's spiritual side, something which would become more pronounced decades later and would ultimately land him a role in the underrated John Carpenter film Prince of Darkness.
There's another track called Prince of Darkness.
Yes.
Now, I understand that you're also going to be appearing in a John Carpenter film called Prince of Darkness. So is therefore that track going to be in the film as well?
It will be in the film. Yeah. I actually just went down to the set to watch him film it.
Oh, really?
He stuck me in the movie and then he expanded the part. So I actually do wipe a few people out in the movie.
He spits on life, he spits on God, he spits on death for you and me. Prince of Darkness studies the world.
The thing I did in Prince of Darkness where I put the bicycle through the guy's chest.
Right, yeah.
John Carpenter saw us do that on stage with a mic stand. And he wanted to know if we could use that in the movie, only with a different props. I mean, it does influence back and forth.
With solid openers, a sensational second side featuring the horror metal trinity of Chop Chop Chop, Gale, and closing out with the exceptional Roses on White Lace, Raise Your Fist and Yell was the most consistent album Alice had done to that point, though thankfully, it wouldn't be the last. But sadly, with stars arising in his own midst, from Kip Winger to Kane Roberts, Alice could see the writing on the wall and kicked his baby birds right out of the nest.
I suddenly got another record deal, and my record deal was on Geffen. Alice Cooper got another record deal, and so it seemed like, creatively they wanted us to move in different directions. But I mean, the intention really was to do a third tour. I had another gun guitar made. It looked more like what Sigourney Weaver had for the Aliens movie when she walks down and locks and loads. A pretty intense item. I got a knock on the door. It was first thing in the morning. I was sleeping, and I said, "What?" Alice opens the door, and he's got 2 bags, and he's standing there, and he goes, "I'm leaving you." So.
Well, the whole album, the Trash album, is not a blood and guts album like Raise Your Fist and Yell and Constrictor was. Because I think if I would have done another horror album, I would have really been painting myself in the corner in blood. I mean, I can do that, and I do like doing the horror thing. But I think the most dangerous thing I could think of in the 90s is sex.
The breakup of the Constrictor, Coom, Raise Your Fist and Yell era lineup is utterly bizarre. Kip Winger, I get. Dude had music to make and millions of records to sell. Hell, Kane Roberts' first album had a song hit the top fucking 40. As it turns out, old Kane has a hell of a set of pipes himself.
You look so hot, I got to get me some leg. So much more the flesh and bone.
But on paper, the parting makes no sense. First and fucking foremost, neither party particularly wanted to part ways with one another, and it was almost entirely orchestrated by the record company. Like, okay, you got your credibility album out of the way. Trash is your money-making goddamn glam record. Get it, got it, good. But here's the issue. Nothing in Kane Roberts' solo career wound up being any heavier than what Alice put down on Trash. Hell, some of the stuff on Saints and Sinners is arguably softer. They arguably could have kept the guy and cranked out an even better version of the same album they ultimately got. So what gives? Well, with a keener eye, it becomes obvious, as between Raise Your Fist and Trash, Alice Cooper would provide a single for the movie Iron Eagle 2, an exceptional cover of Spirit's I Got a Line on You.
I got a line on you, babe. Yeah, I got a line on you. Yeah.
Now, anyone with ears can tell that is clearly Kane Roberts playing guitar on that track. So who the hell is this gangly fagaloon in the fucking video badly miming over his guitar parts? Hell, none of these knobs wound up playing on or appearing with Alice over the coming tour for Trash. So what the frizzy-haired fuck is up with all these pretty boys? And then you realize these are hired fucking models. They're not even musicians. The record company wanted top 10 success so butt fucking bad, they were hiring homos off the street because they look pretty to cash in on the success of goddamn glam. And now you know why they hired/fired Kane Roberts. He's an amazing guitarist who'd grown into an exceptional songwriter, but he looked more like Rambo than Rachel fucking Bolin. But if you thought Alex would be out an exceptional guitarist as a result, you are oh so fucking mistaken, as sliding into the 6-string slot, at least on tour, would be the almighty Al Pitrelli. Yes, that Al Pitrelli of Savatage, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and motherfucking Megadeth fame. The record itself would be something of a grab bag, featuring hired hands of all shapes and sizes. There's still some of the metallic acrobatics of Raise Your Fist on offer here, but with Alice teaming up with all-time 80s hitmaker Desmond Child, this was destined to be a much more commercial affair from the outset. An album crafted from opener to closer to crush the fucking charts, and none crushed harder than Poison.
It's a headbanger's Halloween with me, Alice, and...
Hi, Mr. Cooper.
It's Iggy.
Trick or treat.
Iggy always comes around because I have his favorite treat.
Well, give me some of it.
I got it right here.
Come on, give it to me.
We're going to play one of your videos.
Oh, no. Let's see your video, Mr. Cooper.
No. We'll play one of your videos.
No. I want to see one of yours.
Well, all right. I think he's right. Let's show one of mine. Poison. There you go.
Just to hear you screaming my name, don't wanna touch you, but you're under my skin. I wanna kiss you, but your lips are venomous poison. You're poison.
And by way of support of my argument that Kane could have just as easily continued on this album, well, he fucking did. And the song he co-wrote along with Alice and Desmond turned out to be the standout of the bunch, Bed of Nails. Look, if a massive album is what the record company wanted, it arrived exactly as ordered. 2 top 40 singles and a top 20 album at a time when glam metal was sort of kind of already on its way out. Trash gets a bad rap from rock audiences, but dig beneath the bubblegum presentation, and it's still a solid rock record with a reasonably sharp edge. The most lamentable aspect of the reinvention was the accompanying stripped-down stage show, during which Alice Cooper only wore his signature makeup for half, and which featured few of the gory stage sequences that had awed audiences on the previous 2 tours. Although, given the fact that the Raise Your Fist and Yell tour got banned on half the fucking planet from the gore, perhaps that was a blessing in disguise. This was Alice made mainstream, is my point. Much in the same way billion-dollar babies in schools out had 1 decade previous, and for better or for worse, it worked. What no one could have foreseen is that for Alice and for hair metal in its entirety, it would prove to be something of a last hurrah.
I think the thing that makes this album sound a little bit 70-ish also is we took chord patterns that we used in Love It to Death, which was a 70s album, and kind of reworked some of those chord patterns. The Alice that people see on stage would never talk to anybody. He never talks to me. It's a total split personality. It's a Jekyll and Hyde situation.
But if it was all about to end, 1991's Hey Stoopid served as one hell of a last hurrah. Hell, it's hard to complain about a year where you were featured prominently in both Wayne's World and you're cast as Freddy Krueger's father in Nightmare on Elm Street 6.
Well, we gotta get going.
No. Stick around. Hang out with us.
Cool. Yeah, we'll stay and hang around with yous. With Alice Cooper.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
You've been away since the day I took you in. Now it's time to take your medicine.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, the motherfucker bought the second O in the Hollywood sign. True story.
I read that Alice Cooper paid for the famous Hollywood letters on the hillside to be fixed up and repainted with his own money.
That's right. One letter.
Which one?
The O for Groucho. And I gave it to Groucho right before he died.
Point being, by now, Alice Cooper had been fully embraced by the zeitgeist. Unfortunately for Alice, not to mention his somewhat misguided record company, the zeitgeist was about to blow its bowels all over the entire glam metal genre, which is something of a shame, as taken on its own, 1991's often beshitted Hey Stoopid is arguably even stronger than its poisonous predecessor. All too often falsely characterized as wimpier than trash. If anything, repeated listens have proven the record quite the fucking opposite. The ballads have much more teeth than trash. The lead single, Feed My Frankenstein, is heavier on the whole than Poison ever fucking was, and I don't remember a single song anywhere near as heavy as Hurricane Years.
I need a preacher, breathing fire to burn away my sin. And I can't help the victims on the side of the road.
But you'd be forgiven for assuming as much, given how overblown much of Hey Stoopid happens to be, with appearances by everyone from Steve Vai to Slash, Ozzy Osbourne, and Joe Satriani, to perhaps the most poncy-ass monster ballad bullshit Alice Cooper ever cranked out. The 7-minute, slow as molasses, might as well be on Mars.
You turn my world into a dark and lonely place, like a planet lost in space. My life's fading. I cross the universe to be right where you are.
We get it, Alice. You miss your wife. Next time, send a fucking postcard and write something that rocks. Which is honestly a shame, as the ballads on Hey Stoopid have an infinitely higher batting average than trash ever boasted. Poison notably excluded. Dangerous Tonight, for one, is fucking stellar, and Love's a Loaded Gun might be one of the best Alice Cooper songs, full fucking stop.
I can't take it. One down, one to go. Just another bullet in the chamber. Sometimes love's a loaded gun. Red lights, stop and go.
Don't let dipshits on the internet inform you otherwise. Hey Stoopid is stellar, but it's the right record at the wrong time. I mean, you know your 15 minutes is almost up when the subsequent Operation Rock and Roll tour, stacked to the rafters with iconic bands like Judas Priest, Alice Cooper, and Motorhead, winds up canceling shows halfway due to low sales.
One of the things that really surprised me was, I mean, obviously being an Alice fan for so long and being a big Judas Priest fan for so long, and both you guys living in Arizona, other than this show, you guys didn't even know each other.
No, he lives about a mile away from me, and the first time we really met was when we did this thing going up Sunset Boulevard in a tank in Los Angeles a few weeks ago to promote this Operation Rock and Roll. But since then, we've become, you know, talking friends, and I'm sure we'll be seeing each other a lot in the future, you know.
Yes, it would be at these infamous shows that the much ballyhooed bullshit about Rob Halford knocking himself out while riding his bike, breaking his own nose, and being unable to perform Hellbent for Leather incident took place, making this the tour that killed Judas Priest. How bad were the 90s? I can only explain thusly. Alice Cooper, a legend of hard rock and heavy metal, released just 2 albums in the entire decade. Fortunately for the Coop Troop, the following release would be anything but a dud.
This album is not trying to be political. It's, I think, if anything, it's more spiritual. You know, on a level of you know, if you want to have a society that has black and white, what's happening now is everything's black. There is no white. You know, so there is no, you know, dare Alice Cooper say it, the whole world needs a shot of morality.
Look down and see
And he said, I have an artist on my label who wants to do an album with a story. And he wants to know if you'll write the story. And I said, well, who is it? And he said, Alice Cooper. I think what was really strange was I met him the week Wayne's World came out. And I hadn't seen Wayne's World, hadn't heard of it. And I'm walking with Alice out of the hotel restaurant, going up to my room to sit and talk about the project. And these people see Alice. They run down the hall. And they throw themselves to their knees going, we are not worthy, we are not worthy. And I looked at him. You know, I thought, what is this? Is this some kind of cult in Phoenix of Alice worshippers? I mean, what happens here, Alice? And he just he looked at me, he said, don't worry, it happens all the time. You'll get used to it. And indeed, it happened every time I was with him in public.
Ah, the eternal cock tease of the concept album. Seems for every Operation Mindcrime or Crimson Idol, there's a Nostra-fucking-Damus. Hell, in Alice's own career, concept records could swing in either direction, from the exceptional From the Inside to the utterly insipid Lace and Whiskey. Stacking the deck further still, the landscape of music itself had utterly transmogrified since Hey Stoopid, with the onset of grunge making mascara and teased hair anything but en vogue. Ironically, due to a bunch of Seattle bands that almost to a man idolized the living shit out of Alice Cooper. Go check out Kurt Cobain's eye makeup sometime. In fact, at least one of these grunge icons, the recently departed Chris Cornell, would actually appear on Alice's next album, arguably his most elaborate, thoughtful, and unabashedly Christian work to that point, The Last Temptation.
I take your words and try them on. He tells me one size fits us all.
Now, your mileage may vary, but I find when a concept album actually works, it's often because the band in question embrace it wholeheartedly. No reservations, no hesitation. They marry music and story into an inextricable mass of metal. Perhaps no concept record of the 90s did this more completely than The Last Temptation, with some of the most beautifully filmed, richly produced music videos echoing exact scenes from the story, and an accompanying graphic novel adapted by former Crow and TMNT artist Michael Zulli and adapted by one of the foremost scribes in all of comics, Neil Gaiman, scenes from which were featured in the album's inaugural single, the upbeat Lost in America.
So I'm looking for a girl with a gun and a job in a house with cable. Don't you know where you are? Hey man, you're lost in America, lost in America.
Now that tune and at least 4 others were co-written by Dan Wexler of Arizona AOR Pioneers Icon, which perhaps explains why The Last Temptation turned out to be among the most metal releases in Alice's already iconic career. So heavy, in fact, that when even darker efforts would be forthcoming afterward, The Last Temptation would be falsely considered the first album in a trilogy it actually doesn't belong to, but you can be forgiven for mistaking it with this future experiment in industrial metal, as shown by tracks such as the dark anti-drug morality fable, Bad Place Alone.
Yeah. They call me Smokey Joe and I'm as feeling as a coroner's needle. Well, I got a pocket full of rocks, man, I shake like a cold chihuahua.
The story is a simple morality play. A young man slowly corrupted by the world as he finds himself descending into a macabre Alice Cooper in Wonderland type tale, compromising to drugs, women, and the call of the crowd, all while called to the cause of Christ. Neil Gaiman, to that point unaware of Alice's faith, was so struck by it, he actually had to scrap much of his original outline for the comic adaptation and approach it in a more conventional biblical context. The comic is killer, for the record, among Gaiman's most underrated and overlooked work, and if you intend to buy it, I can't recommend the black and white hardcover reprint highly enough, as Michael Zulli's art looks just fine in color, but becomes downright majestic in monochrome. If Hey Stoopid was successful with audiences and less so with critics, The Last Temptation was the exact opposite. Universally regarded as among Alice's absolute best, and yet it did dick with a side of sack in sales. As such, the record company refused to fucking fund a tour, and it wouldn't be until the 95 Monsters of Rock that Alice would even play these songs at a live setting. It was abundantly clear after that 2-year hiatus that the entire world had changed in the interim, and if Alice intended to endure, a hard reset would be outright required. But Alice Cooper didn't meekly tap that reset button. He hammered that shit like the fist of an angry god.
See, now you look nasty, but from that, you're a nice guy deep down at heart.
Well, you know, I have my moments of nice.
You're not getting too nice, though, are you?
I don't think so.
You sure? You promise?
No.
Please don't get too nice.
Look at me.
Yeah, but we filmed you earlier on when you were caught doing this.
Wait, you followed me?
Yeah, apparently.
Cat, my cat is stuck in the tree. My cat.
Oh,
look,
okay.
I can't get it
I'll
down.
get her. I'll get her. Come on, sweetheart. Oh, there you go. There you go. No problem at all. It's okay.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. The cat was in the tree and the girl couldn't get it.
It's Cooper.
Are you telling me that you think I'm getting soft?
I am.
You really think I'm getting
I am.
soft? Yeah, it doesn't. I'm out of here.
I'm like a mad dog. I'm on a short leash. I'm on a tightrope, hanging by a thread.
Now, for all Alice's fortunes were fucking waning throughout the decade, it's a common misconception to say heavy metal died in the 1990s. Quite the opposite. In pure monetary terms, the 90s may actually have been an even more massive success for metal. What had its ass torn in half was hair metal. The European and South American festival scene exploded with Germanic power metal, and what had once been uncommercial thrash acts in the 80s, such as Metallica, were suddenly titans of top 40 radio. But make no mistake, there was money to be made in 90s metal, and in the latter portion of the decade, much of it migrated to the incipient industrial metal genre. And from White Zombie to Ministry, Alice was all too aware of it. In fact, after The Last Temptation, Alice Cooper collaborated with Rob Zombie for live re-recordings of Feed My Frankenstein, School's Out, and Elected.
Feed my Frankenstein. Meet my libido. He's such a psycho. Feed my
Feed My Frankenstein, a song so killer, I forgive Alice for describing a vagina as, and I quote, a fur teacup. Now, this relationship would ultimately flower into one of mutual respect and brotherly affection, resulting in several crossovers on stage, and even later a trio appearance with one other shock rock renegade. And it was this man Alice's sights were squarely set on with Brutal Planet, Marilyn Manson, hot off Holywood, having long since declared himself an Antichrist superstar. Alice had something of an axe to grind with Marilyn's modern incarnation of his own persona, and so Brutal Planet and its accompaniment would function as something of a reply to the newly crowned king of shock rock, though ironically one of the lead singles of Brutal Planet was arguably a defense of Marilyn Manson, who was already being blamed for the recent Columbine shootings, even as Alice explicated the true reasons for mass shootings in the utterly killer Wicked Young Man.
I am a vicious young man. Oh, I am a wicked young man. It's not the games that I play, the movies I see, the music I dig. I'm just a wicked young man.
Marilyn is just as much a vaudevillian as I am. You know how to entertain the audience. We didn't know what was going to crawl through. We just wanted to break the door down so people could do theatrics. I mean, I think Marilyn Manson, I applaud him for doing a great show. I don't agree with anything that he says, but I applaud to the fact that he actually rehearses and does a great show. But I've made a point to say, you really want Satan as your buddy? Think about it. You know, you think that this guy is out to help you along?
How sweet sweepingly goddamn depressing is it that a fucking rock star who, when asked his opinion on politics, regularly replies, if you're taking political advice from a rock and roll musician, you deserve the state of your fucking country, nevertheless has an endlessly more accurate depiction of the psychic and societal outliers that breed the archetypal school shooter than a flannel-plated pussy profiteer who's paid thousands of dollars to do exactly goddamn that. Oh, and fun fact, the cover of Brutal Planet was actually illustrated by none other than Alice's former guitarist, Kane Roberts, who in the years since Raise Your Fist and Constrictor has become something of an accomplished illustrator. True fact, folks. Ably produced by Bob Marlette, who is fresh from the Black Sabbath reunion record, this would prove a fruitful partnership, at least for the foreseeable future. But if you wanted to see industrial-era Alice in full effect, you needed to catch the coupe on stage.
I've always liked the idea of not just doing the songs. If you're going to say Brutal Planet, give them Brutal Planet.
Yeah.
If he catches me warning you, he'll kill me. If I'm fortunate. What have we become here on Brutal Planet?
Why won't you come down to
And the stage show did not disappoint, with some of the most eye-popping stage effects Alice Cooper had ever produced, heavier guitars, and an all-new lineup led by Ryan Roxy, who's since become something of a mainstay. Brutal Planet was a complete industrial metal palingenesis for old-school Alice. Alice would even give himself a post-apocalyptic samurai makeover that would carry over into Brutal Planet's companion piece 1 year later. Hell, he even took the piss out of the then-ascendant boy band trend, and more importantly, what it said about the sad state of society.
fame and money all for you? I can make your every dream come true. Give me that, give me this, give me that, give me that, give me that, give me this, give me that, give me that, give me that, give me this, give me that, give me that, give me that, give me this.
Well, yeah. Somebody had to do it. Thank you for, can I just shake your hand? Somebody had to do it. But, you know, I would like to say that there were no actual boy bands hurt in the production.
So what took so long between albums? Well, it was around this time Alice began giving back to Arizona itself with a Phoenix-exclusive annual concert that has since become positively legendary. Alice Cooper's Christmas Pudding, now in its 23rd fucking year.
It's me, the ghost of Pudding's past. Do you remember?
Oh, I remember. I remember. So you're the ghost of Pudding's past, eh?
Yes. Why do you ask?
Oh, no reason.
Hey, Dad. I mean, Alice. It is me, the ghost of Pudding's future.
Well, of course you are.
Yes, and this is what I see for the 10th annual Christmas Pudding.
10th annual? Already?
Never mind his now infamous proclivity for the game of golf.
Can golfers rock? Can rockers golf? Find out in Fairway to Heaven, a VH Hole-in-One special presentation tonight at 10.
Welcome to my 9-iron.
And as a reflection of his faith, he opened the Hard Rock Foundation, intended to rescue and minister to at-risk youth by inculcating them into rock and roll, a charity I'm happy to say I've actually volunteered with in the past, and even performed at a Battle of the Bands they once convened in like 2005, I think, though sadly Alice was not in attendance on that particular occasion. I should also mention that shortly before this album, original Alice guitar god Glenn Buxton would tragically pass away, something which Alice would both acknowledge and commemorate going forward. For forward he was bound. Brutal Planet is savage, stunningly consistent, and a more direct morality parable than perhaps even The Last Temptation, all steeped in a rust-caked coat of hellish cyberpunk. It flies under all too many rockers' radars, so if it flew under yours, correct your fucking mistake and spin it next.
Hey, when was your last family weekend? Go sightseeing, attend a ball game, visit a theme park, and you know, quality family time. You don't want your kids to grow up to be weirdos, do you?
No. I mean...
You have a great day.
We can dig you a hole deep in the ground, bury your soul down DragonTown. We'll be lower than low, spiraling down.
I like it when Marilyn says, you know, hey, listen to all your albums, and that's, you know, I wanted to create my own. Kiss said the same thing. And I sit there and I smile and I go, that's great, you know, that's really, really good. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, you still have to deal with me.
Mistakenly asserted to be a triptych, beginning with The Last Temptation, 2001's DragonTown is in actuality a two-part diptych, although looking back, one has to wonder if it was intended as the middle chapter in a trilogy which was never concluded. Everything about Brutal Planet is deepened and expanded on DragonTown, from the darksome industrial of the title track to the post-apocalyptic religiosity of its lyrical themes. Think of this album as Alice's Inferno, a descent into a cyberpunk conception of hell, exploring each chamber in kind, taking painstaking stock of the sinners interred therein. It's clear DragonTown is intended as a Mephistophelian allegory from the moment Alice, along with the listener, plummet headlong into the ominous sludge of Deeper.
Solid ground and never look straight down. Deeper,
Brutal Planet occasionally courts praise, but the even darker DragonTown is all too often passed over. And speaking of Passover, the album also features some of Alice's most overt examples of heavy metal ministry before or frankly fucking since.
If you become a Christian, what you're saying is I'm not God anymore.
Yeah.
If you're saying I'm not God anymore, that's everybody wants to be God. Even Christians have a hard time giving up your life. You know, that's the last thing they want to give up.
They say write what you know, and this is a man who once floated a balloon of his own head down the Thames River in an attempt to get the Royal Air Force to shoot it down for fucking publicity. I think he knows a little something about the fruitlessness of unchecked ego, folks. And speaking of ego, as we explore the lower chambers of Alice's personal hell, one song that stands out immediately is something of a rock and roll parody of a, pompadour-bedecked, solid white singlet-wearing hard rock monarch who may or may not have expired on a fucking toilet.
He lived on southern deep-fried spam, killed on pills and woke in disgrace land. Disgrace land. Disgrace land.
I got a thing that says Elvis wants to meet you. I got to the Hilton Hotel, and he has his own elevator that goes up to the Hilton Hotel. And I get there, and in the elevators, Chubby Checker, Liza Minnelli, and Linda Lovelace, and me. Wow. He goes, hey man, you're the cat with a snake, ain't you? He said, yeah. And he goes, that's cool, man. I wish I would have thought of that. That's cool, man. He said, hey, I want to show you something. Takes out a loaded Smith & Wesson 38.
Did you guys see Jimmy Kimmel?
Hands it to me. I'm standing. I start taking the bullets out. He goes, no, it's all right. Let me show you how to take this gun out of somebody's hand. So I'm standing there with a loaded 38 on Elvis. And I'm thinking, shoot him. And the little angel goes, well, don't kill him, just wound him. Before I could decide what to do, I was on the floor. And he's had his boot in my throat. I'm going, it's good, Elvis.
Still stand by that decision not to pull the fucking trigger there, Alice? This album boasts phenomenal bursts of bad taste. In fact, probably one of the best aged songs is slightly less industrial, the ode to unapologetic heavy metal misogyny that is Fantasy Man.
I'm homophobic, don't do aerobics, just lay around and catch a buzz. You just
hidden gems in the pantheon of Alice Cooper shine quite so bright as DragonTown. In all honesty, I may actually prefer it to Brutal Planet, but put the tandem together and you get back-to-back bangers. Unfortunately for the record's commercial prospects, it was also released less than 1 week after two other bangers Allahu Akbar their asses into two buildings in downtown New York. And so the already vanishing record-buying public were largely unaware of this album, and many, sadly, still fucking are. If you get a chance to set them straight, do so, because DragonTown crushes. Next.
I'm best known as Alice Cooper, shock rocker. But I'm into more sophisticated adult things now. Take my MP3 player I got from CompUSA. I download all my favorite tunes from Bach and Beethoven, and sometimes I jam to Rachmaninoff. Oh yeah, the new Techno-Me has no time for childish toys.
We would like to have you here every day. We know you can't make it, but don't forget us. Here is a replica.
Being perpetually aware of industry trends can be something of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can take bits and bobs from bands both old and new, incorporate them and assimilate them to enhance your essential sonic character, and on the other, you're going to wind up doing a half-assed imitation of someone half your age. On Brutal Planet and DragonTown, Alice reclaimed and mastered a metal subgenre which was inspired by him to fucking begin with. But on the eyes of Alice Cooper, inspired by indie rock in the vein of the Strokes and the fucking White Stripes, Alice embraced his garage rock roots. And the results were more mixed than Obama. Sure, there's still some winners here. Album opener What Do You Want From Me is a semi-satirical relationship song in the style of the last album's Fantasy Man. But then there's samey sorta radio rock like Man of the Year or the borderline Ramones worship of I'm So Angry.
I'm so stupid, I'm so angry, running after you, that's what I gotta do. It's like a poison to me, it's like you put me in shock, just take a needle in me.
I wouldn't go so far as to say it's uninspired. It's fast and fucking heavy in places with all the Alice Cooper catchiness you've come to expect. But for all their claims of returning to roots and having stronger songs, when the most notable fact about your album is that there's 4 variant covers, each with different colored eyes, your songs probably aren't what's selling your record. Which is fortunate for the eyes of Alice Cooper, as it sorta sucks in places. It's far from offensive, but after back-to-back brilliance, it's a bigger letdown than Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Next.
I wrote this song when my poisons were alcohol and Class A drugs. Nowadays, most exciting thing that happens to me is a birdie on a par 4 and an occasional erection.
You know how to entertain the audience, but shock the audience. We just saw an entire war on television. We just saw people getting blown up into the sky. Real people, real time, real blood, real death. Really hard to shock an audience by putting your head in the guillotine after that everybody knows is a trick. Or bringing a boa constrictor out. Now, to me, it's pure entertainment.
If Trash and Hey Stoopid was Alice's version of Aerosmith and Brutal Planet and DragonTown his missive to Manson, Dirty Diamonds, as both the year, production quality, and songwriting suggest, is what happens when Alice finally listens to Jet and the Strokes. Look, Alice runs a radio show. He's hip to what's coming and going in rock, and he's far from a musical snob. This floppy-jowled fucker collaborated with Kesha, for Christ's sake.
Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. A long time.
And so, when Jet's smash hit Are You Gonna Be My Girl lit up radio waves on both poles of the planet, and Alice already up to his girdle in garage rock, what happened next was all too predictable. Rather than re-examine what may have worked prior to Eyes of Alice Cooper and evolve from there, he doubled the fuck down on the bell-bottom bedecked hipster hack rock. Look, I like Jet just fine. That song is more overplayed than 10 Back in Black stacked on top of each other, but they're still a decent band. In fact, I like them so much I'd prefer them without face paint and a fucking riding crop. Rather than master your own genre, as you did with Alice Cooper derivatives such as glam metal or industrial, you've made yourself a glorified appendage in someone else's. And the worst parts of Dirty Diamonds suck several appendages in rapid succession.
She can shake it just like J-Lo when the bedroom lights go down. But when she hits the dance floor, she's a hip-hop.
What are these, John Lennon sloppy seconds? Blink twice if Yoko has you hostage. Dirty Diamonds is less Jet than Challenger disaster. And if you're imitating the Stones, you're at least 70% Moss, motherfucker. Of course, I guess John Lennon's sloppy seconds beat the brakes off Snoop Dogg's.
You can stand for peace, you can stand for war. I stand in a square never stood before. I take a stand for my son like a Phoenix Shakur. I take a stand like I'm 46664. Stand alone and my struggle can't make me.
That's right, friends. Alice went full Forbidden on our asses. Only instead of Ice-T, he enlisted Exhibit to provide a rap verse to fucking Stan. And if you don't remember who Exhibit is, kids, consult your local library. Dirty Diamonds is dirty dog shit. And I wish I could say this approach wouldn't be sticking around for a while, but sadly, since the post-DragonTown era, Alice has largely produced half-assed attempts at indie garage rock. But he has taken the occasional pause from this approach, and so what came next would be a bit more on the macabre side.
What's the Along Came a Spider? Is it nursery rhymes for children?
Yes, it is. But this is about a guy that is a serial killer who takes on the role of a spider. He has 8 victims because he needs 8 legs.
You'll get 8 legs together.
But he falls in love with his 8th victim, and he can't kill her.
Oh, is that that's the song at the end?
Called,
I love you, leggy girl.
Yes, no.
Brutal Planet beat ass. Dirty Diamonds sucked ass. But Alice had done musical backflips before and stuck the landing with stunning agility. Welcome to My Nightmare, Constrictor, hell, even his last major concept record, The Last Temptation, bore witness to this fact. But not since the latter half of Raise Your Fist and Yell had Alice Cooper conceptually explored the mind of a serial killer. Enter Along Came a Spider, a grim, gory fable about a serial killer who makes keepsakes of his victims' legs to construct a sick parody of a human spider. And yes, this concept would be flagrantly ripped off by the video game Hunt Showdown 10 years later, a game which features shitloads of Alice Cooper references, by the by. But rather than the delusional killer of Chop 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 confusing each victim with a woman named Gail, the eponymous spider falls in love with his final victim.
I'll let you be the one that got away. Knew it would happen, but I didn't know it'd be today. All the voices in my head always sing and say, the one that's got away.
This moment of weakness proves his undoing until the climactic moment when his internal monologue explains that he's been locked away for decades and calls Spider by his Christian name.
8 legs, 1 body, silk, spider. Brilliant. We've been in this cell for 28 years, Stephen. We couldn't have done all those horrible things.
Yes, Stephen, making this technically a tie-in to Welcome to My Nightmare. Musically, it's a lopsided affair, instructed more by its concept than any unified style. Darker and incrementally more industrial than the preceding 2 efforts, yet neglecting to entirely shed those indie butt rock refrains.
Just wanna get in touch with your feminine side. So cool, you look so sweet. Come on, baby, come on over, baby. It's your world.
I worked in a record store when this came out, and absolutely everyone hated this album but me. To be sure, I far from love it, but it still has a fair few standouts. The Slash collaboration Vengeance Is Mine, for example, is inspired, if somewhat sluggish. To summarize Along Came a Spider, it'd be not the best, but a damn sight better than Dirty Diamonds. Unfortunately for the most of us, that wouldn't remain the case for much longer.
If Alice had a nightmare in 1976, why not give him a nightmare in 2011?
It's a new nightmare. It's a brand new nightmare. Even though I think, in some ways, Alice remembers the first nightmare.
As was by now becoming habitual, Alice changed record companies after releasing Along Came a Spider, this time scoring a decent deal with Universal, and with a larger record contract came higher record company expectations. To serve such expectations would require the enlistment of a few familiar faces. Original Alice Cooper members Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, and Neil Smith contributed 3 songs to the All-Star proceedings, and settling back into the producer's chair after a multi-decade hiatus was Bob Ezrin, who immediately suggested not a simple comeback album, and certainly not the planned sequel to Along Came a Spider. After all, Alice really didn't need a comeback. Dirty Diamonds ate a dick, but it put him back on the charts, and Along Came a Spider sold even better. But rather, with the 30-year anniversary of Welcome to My Nightmare fast approaching, he proposed instead a sequel.
We charted higher than anything we've had in years. I mean, it charted all over the world, you know. It was amazing. I think people were ready for this type of album. It's not it's not a modern album. It's not a dated album. It's just pure Alice. It's a pure Alice type of album. And we go in 8 different directions musically on it, but that's what a nightmare does.
Yes, friends, all the ingredients were in place. Alice in full effect. Voice very much intact. Original Alice members along with Ezra, and even Dick Wagner turned up from the original Nightmare recordings. There's just one tiny whiny, teensy weensy little catch. This album, from first to final track, from every minute of music to every groove on the goddamn vinyl, in every appreciable way, and in every discernible respect, irrefutably, indefatigably, fucking sucks!
I got a pretty face. Yeah, but I seen what's hiding underneath. You like my pretty mouth, but you got razor blades instead of teeth.
Oh, it got great reviews from fucking retards. 5 stars here, 5 stars there. You'd think it was a fucking meteor shower, the amount of undeserved praise this piece of shit accrued on release, but it's awful, and no mistake. Its best moments barely registering in the same neighborhood as Alice's classic material, and its worst? Hey, fellow rock fans, how do you feel about show tunes?
Don't need to care about tomorrow. No pain, I got no sorrow. I'm the last man on earth. So tell me.
Yeah, I think I just threw up in your mouth. You know an album eats when the only honest appraisal is a 2.5 star Rolling Stone review. You have any idea how hard you have to move heaven and earth in the ceaseless pursuit of suck to get Rolling Stone magazine to pause from printing fake college rape stories long enough to tell half the fucking truth? Sure, it charted high at 22, which in 2011 meant what? They sold 2 entire copies? But any success it saw was largely born on the sad and saggy wings of nostalgia. It has better songs here and there than Along Came a Spider did, but the entire sequel story pales in comparison to the previous album, and the anemic songs haven't a hope of keeping this bloated bullshit afloat. But the band themselves were about to undergo something of a metamorphosis to become the stable, established unit we see today. After briefly enlisting guitar goddess Orianthe into the band, fresh off her doomed stint for what was supposed to be Michael Jackson's final tour, a replacement would soon be required for her as she promptly went on to a successful solo career. And so, Alice put the call out to the Iron Maidens, an all-female cover band whose talented guitarist, Nita Strauss, was already making waves among the metal faithful.
Anybody that joins the band, when Nita joined the band, I told her 3 things I could guarantee you. You're going to see the world, you're going to get paid, you're going to get stitches. So everybody gets a little cut, but that's kind of a, you show that with pride.
He's very in the moment, he's very real, and we never really do know where he's going to go with that. And that sword he has on stage is sharp, by the way.
After dueling concept albums, each more elaborate than the last, and Alice apt to group his albums in pairs to begin with, it was obvious the follow-up would likely be a stripped-down hard rock revival. But that left the most of us to wonder, hadn't we already done the douchey diamonds thing? Well, fortunately as it happened, when you're Alice and you're among the more underrated songwriters in rock, you're able to strip down, crank up, and sustain an entire release solely on the strength of the songs. And this time, producer Bob Ezrin stuck around for the follow-up.
Bob Ezrin and I decided that let's break the mold. Let's not make an album where there's a storyline. Let's just make an album of great songs wherever they lie. That's what makes it paranormal. It's not the normal way to do it.
Unfortunately, one familiar face who would not return from the previous album was longtime Alice and Ezrin collaborator Dick Wagner, who passed away in 2014, sadly, of the exact same thing original Alice Cooper guitarist Glenn Buxton had, a wicked case of pneumonia. What are your band members being haunted by the ghost of Jim Henson, Alice? Get a goddamn checkup. And it's a shame we lost him, because he missed one hell of a fucking party. Everything Eyes of Alice and its sequel lacked, 2017's Paranormal does not. With under 4-minute metal and hard rock arrangements packed with energy and that patented Alice swagger, Paranormal is arguably the album Alice Cooper intended to release in 2003, which is appropriate, incidentally, as returning to the guitar slot on this record was Brutal Planet Axeman Ryan Roxy, and his creative infusion was immediately apparent. Even experiments with indie atmospherics pay off plenty, such as standout track Fireball, which between the repetitive chorus and fucky effect on the vocals should, on paper, profoundly suck, but instead, like much of the accompanying album, it stubbornly refuses to do anything but rule. But the headline grabber on Paranormal was undoubtedly the return of original Alice members Dennis Dunaway, Neil Smith, and Michael Bruce for a collection of all-new Alice Cooper tracks. The first of which, a somber song about social media entitled Sound of A, turned into a sleeper single.
When the original band broke up, we never broke up with any bad blood. We didn't there were no lawsuits. Neil called me up in Phoenix and he says, hey, I've got a couple of songs. And I went, okay, let's hear them. And I listened to them. We worked on them for a few days. And he says, hey, Mike's coming into town. Oh, bring him over. So we ended up writing for a week. And when you hear it on the record, it just fits right in.
But both these tracks are atypical of the album. When you crank this record, the first thing you're struck by is how heavy it is and how every subsequent song is doggedly determined not to wear out its welcome. Most of this shit is under 3 minutes, folks. And unlike, say, a modern Maiden arrangement, rare is the occasion that you're eager for any of them to end. It gets a fair bit on the flabby side near the mid to late portion, but by the time the OG Cooper crew roll on in on the back end, their clear chemistry puts Paranormal right back on track, and it stays there. It took us a while, folks, but by 2017, we finally found a follow-up worthy of 2001's DragonTown. Next!
You know, when you go to the Grammys, there's no rock and roll there. Maybe the Foo Fighters, maybe Green Day, you know, or what they pick one band that's going to be their rock band. It used to be every single act in rock was in the Grammys. I like rock being in a place right now where we're sort of the outlaws again. So rock and roll's in a good place. We're back to what we should be. We're the villains, we're the rock and roll outlaws.
You know, the origins of football can actually be traced much further back than most people realize.
Did not know that. Me neither. That's cool.
We all know what occurred in 2020. The Pinko Pox loomed large, the summer of love lit our cities on fire, the world was locked the fuck down, and touring was out of the question. Alice's solution? Studio time! But in a very particular sort of way.
I said, let's do an album about Detroit, in Detroit, and record there, write the album there, only use Detroit players, and make it pure Detroit. And I guarantee you it'll come out to be a roaring rock and roll album, because that's what Detroit is.
With the original Cooper members once again along for the ride and Ezrin able to devote all of his energy to the album, the table appeared set for the follow-up to end all fucking follow-ups. And then they actually recorded the fucking thing.
We don't have near enough time to even dream of committing a crime. Got no future, got no reason, got no rhyme, 'cause that's all we're given.
For an album called Detroit Stories, the saddest indictment of the record is that the patented Detroit rock sound don't even show up till 4 tracks in with the solid Social Debris.
What you say is social debris.
Worse still, you call further attention to how little of the Detroit sound is actually present here by recording a killer cover of Michigan's own MC5.
'Cause you're my sister Ann.
With material as awful as Our Love Will Change the World and the deceptively titled Rock and Roll, problem is by the time the real rockers show up later in the record, you almost feel bad the good songs have to associate with this feckless fucking drivel. Case in point, the poor put upon Shut Up and Rock, a brilliant bit of social comment wrapped in a kick-ass rock tune, imploring Instagram rock stars to put down their fucking phones, stop waving Biden-Harris 24 signs, and write songs that don't suck steaming ass.
Shut up and rock. Why can't you just shut up and rock? Don't wanna hear about your yoga class or how you spent your day. Don't wanna hear about...
You know, like Alice is not involved in devil worship or Satan worship or anything like that. I think there's probably more Satan worshipers in politics.
Any artist that tries to get up on the stage and say something is really silly, because you know what can anybody say that you don't already know? You know what's wrong and what's right. You know, and then when they get up there and say, "Oh, save the trees and save the water and save all this," that's kind of silly because everybody knows that anyways.
Detroit Stories feels more like an EP with a few fucking covers thrown in than an actual album, and as such is a bit of a stumble after its powerful predecessor. Yet as everyone either left their homes or died of suddenly over the following year, it was time for Alice to tour at last. And tour he fucking did. Between his own band and an all-new supergroup with Aerosmith's Joe Perry and none other than Johnny Depp called the Hollywood Vampires, Alice reasoned, hell, half my time spent on the road. Why not write an album about it?
I wanted the band, I said, everybody write me a song. Write me a couple songs about the road. And they all came in with songs. And all of them were developed into this album. In fact, I don't think they've heard what we've done to their songs yet.
And just then, something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, Nita Strauss, a rising star in her own right, got a call from the big time. Demi Lovato?
And I get a call from Demi's musical director basically saying that Demi is she has finished a new record, which is a much harder edge style than what she's done before. And she wants to not only play these new songs live, but she wants to rework her older material to fit this new style, you know. And as we all know, like we've all heard it by now, Demi is a legit metalhead, like a hard rock fan. She listens to heavier shit than I do, which is crazy because I listen to some heavy shit. Like,
yes, fresh from declaring herself a non-gendered pan-species neurodivergent fucking sea anemone, Demi Lovato decided to make a cringy statement about feminism and hired Nita Strauss as part of an all-female backing band. Quick question to me, who you gonna hire as a singer? But that's not where it gets interesting. Godspeed to Nita for taking the gig. I'm sure it pays better than Charlie Sheen's smack salesman. No, the real story was who they hired to replace her.
Well, guess what the biggest headline was in the last couple months?
Well,
it was you.
Nothing to do with me. Yeah. I mean,
it's Kane Roberts returning as guitarist for Alice Cooper. I wish I could do a little welcome back Cotter theme music, but we don't have the money and we don't have the budget right now to actually afford the licensing for that. Yeah. But welcome back to the Alice Cooper family. You never really left.
Yes, friends, Kane Roberts, still looking very much like a rock and roll Rambo, might I add, got the nod to return to the ranks of Alice Cooper. Though in truth, to hear him tell it, he never really left the family. And so for the 2022 tour and well into 2023, Kane caught up with Alice as only he can, and the shows were exceptionally well received. For about 15 minutes till Nita came crawling back. Damn, Demi, why you gotta swap out so fast? They're bandmates, bitch, not gender pronouns. Fortunately, as an outgrowth of their renewed relationship, Kane contributed songwriting to The Road record. Not that you could tell it from the weak as fuck opening single.
And I'm Alice, the master of madness, the father of fright. I'm Alice. I'm yours forever, but you're mine tonight.
And that's a neat remix of Elected, Alice, but where's the actual song hiding? As it turns out, everywhere the fuck else. I'm embarrassed to say I was so put off by how bad I'm Alice was as a single, I put off listening to the album itself for weeks after I owned it. Then, out riding alone in the desert one night, I said, hell, if an album called Road can't win me over in this context, nothing the fuck can. So I threw the fucker on and discovered that what's hiding out on the album as a whole is outright exceptional, such as a song I must have headbanged to on repeat for an uninterrupted 45 fucking minutes before I even bothered to look in the booklet and realize it was written by Kane Roberts.
If I wasn't in a band, they would need to do away with me.
You may also hear a few familiar tunes.
They call me White Line Frankenstein. White Line Frankenstein. On the road.
She's my cherry pie. Oh shit, I'm sorry. Oh hell, why not? Janie Lane ain't using that song anyway. Along with anything the fuck else. You know, Nita Strauss has a veritable legion of admirers. She can shred, she's visibly fucking talented, and she's sear the eyebrows off your face fucking hot. But she ain't perfect, folks, and having listened to her solo output, as well as the few tunes over the past 3 releases that she contributed creatively to, I have, in the spirit of the Iron Age, crafted just for her the following poem. Me. Carnations are white, so is my dong. Nita Strauss still can't write a song. And one of the weaker entries on the album, Welcome to the Show, clearly demonstrates this fact.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Are you ready to ride to the other side? You know you wanna go.
And I'm happy to report that on the road, the few duds are drastically outnumbered by the bangers. This is not only decent, it's the finest Alice album in a minute. And as he strikes out on the titular road, bitch, you best go see his legendary ass. If there's one thing Alice Cooper proves, it's that the secret to never looking old is never looking young to begin with. The Coop looked like the Crypt Keeper back in '78, and so as other rock stars disintegrate into sawdust before our blinkered vision, Alice's ageless ass still brings the house down every damn night, well into his mid-70s, while delivering infinitely more coherent interviews than our president. As anyone who's been to a Cooper show in the past 20 fucking years will attest, it's not nostalgia. It's not a charitable interpretation of events. In 2023, in the face of withering competition that's half his age and hopped up on pills, Alice Cooper, clean as a whistle, remains arguably the best touring show in all of rock. If he's in town and you don't see him, that shit is on you. I'm Razor Fist until we return once more from the mists of the mythos. God fucking speed.
We're the Department of You. Your new Department of You. We're the Department of You.
After a hard day of slaughtering things on stage, I always get a little dry, and I like Diet Pepsi. Why Diet Pepsi? Because it tastes so good.